One, two, one, two. Who's all out here today watching the title card? Our rated conservative is sitting out here watching with us here. Couple more seconds here, change some settings, and we will get started. One, two, one, two. Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I am Jay Edgar, and I'm joined today by a podcast host and somebody whom I'm hoping will be joining up with us and have some news in the near future here. But please welcome Jessica Green. Jessica, welcome to Ed's World.
Hi Ed, how's it going?
It's going good. I know we talked a little bit over here off mic here, and we do hope that you'll join up with us here, but we'll have some more details with that coming up here in the near future.
Yeah, we'll see how much of a disaster my first live performance is, and we'll go from there.
There's no such thing as disasters over here on Freedom Scoop. I know, I almost made a disaster yet this morning. I don't know if anybody caught the live stream of the first episode of Contemporary, but I managed to have my alarm clock go off right in the middle of it. Because I'm used to getting up 2 hours later than I usually do. So that was all good. Okay.
You just woke everybody up, that's all.
I was in the other room too, so I actually had to get up off the chair to go and shut it down.
No. Okay. Well, I don't feel so bad because that sounds like something that I would do. So.
Anyway, this is Ed's World. My name is Jay Edgar. We've got a lot to talk about here, but before we get started, I wanted to talk just a bit about something that I've noticed in the last couple days, and I know Jessica and I talked a bit about our mutual interest in Twitch before we went live here, but I've been noticing as I've been watching more and more Twitch videos here that, you know, sometimes when you watch Twitch, you get the same advertisement over and over again every single time, and I've been getting advertisements for Universal Pictures' The Hunt again, which I thought was tabled up until, or because of its political overtones, and it's very, very obvious bias towards the left and possibly something that could incite a riot, but I guess it's greenlit back again, and it's going to be coming back, so get ready to watch liberal elites go and hunt down conservatives who sit behind golden. One of them actually has a golden microphone on there too, so.
Oh my God. Yeah, so I don't know if anybody remembers, but there was a movie a few years back called, I believe it was called Red State. And the concept of that movie was that there was a group of, they were like, I would compare them to maybe like Westboro Baptist Church level people, like a church cult. And they went out and actually hunted down people to bring back to their church cult and like murder them. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to give away the ending because the ending was actually pretty clever, but it reminded me of that movie just flipped. Except for when that movie came out, it was, you know, a lot less political than it is today. Maybe the polarization wasn't quite there.
Oh, it's absolutely polarized now. So
yeah, it's a little bit of a different thing in the sense of that it could incite action, which is not something that, you know, maybe like 10 years ago or so when that movie came out, that would have been the thing that you wouldn't have thought as much. I mean, I guess people were incited to action by movies. There's always people like that, but yeah, it's sort of there have been movies like that in the past. So when I heard about it, I was like, oh, it's like that other movie, Red State. I think it's called Red State. I'm not positive. But that movie was pretty decent too. So I'm pretty like open-minded when it comes to art. I want there to be all kinds of offensive art too. Mm-hmm. So I like that this is here in the sense that it does sort of balance and that it is offensive, so it creates a conversation. And that's kind of what art is meant to do, is challenge the status quo. So even though this has a very inflammatory message to it, it also, we're here talking about it. And it's going to get a lot of other people talking about maybe the role of political violence in our society. And that's a good thing too.
Well, this is a developing story again, so we will keep an eye on this in the coming weeks because we've got a full show to get to around the hunt. We have 2020 Watch up on the top because that is dominating the news these days. So we just had debate number 10 happen up this past week. So we'll watch a little video of the highlights of that, and we'll talk about some of the things that we didn't catch on the highlight reel as well, and our winners and losers. South
Mhm.
Carolina had their primary this past week as well, and Joe Biden pulled a surprise win. So we'll talk about that and how he won walking away, and we'll also talk about some of the people that decided that they didn't want to play anymore after South Carolina. Coronavirus has claimed a life in the United States and possibly a second one at this point. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll look at a picture of the statistics that we have going on and talk about what we can do going forward with this as well. The Young Turks has refused to unionize, and I actually have a hilarious video to go with that. So we'll talk a bit about the hypocrisy that comes there and what's going on there and what the future is for the Young Turks. Our friends over at Project Veritas have struck again, this time striking David Wright over at ABC for admitting bias and various other things that he said in the conversation. So we'll talk a bit about that. And finally, we'll get a philosophical topic going here. The Justice Department has discussed denaturalization for people who became citizens through naturalization, but have committed heinous crimes, including terrorism, rape, and murder. I don't necessarily agree with all of this, but we'll discuss the conscientiousness of this and why it is they're trying to do this now. It's going to be all of this and more over on Ed's World. Thanks for checking us out live over on YouTube, DLive, Twitch, and Periscope for Twitter. No Facebook. We still can't get past the Zuck hump. So, sorry to all my Facebook friends, but we are not going to be able to do anything with that. Let's see. What else do we have here? Ed's World is available over on the audio platforms as well. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Or you can catch this video back on demand on YouTube and BitChute.com. Remember, if you're over on iTunes, leave us that 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts. And if you're on YouTube or BitChute, leave us that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Come and check us out as well. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group, along with my other show, Contemporary, The Generational Gap, and Stephen Ignoramus' show, Roundtable Decision. And now we are adding the R-rated conservative to our lineup, so go check us all out over there. Wherever you find any of our shows, they'll all point you to the same direction, so go ahead and check us out all over there. After a lengthy introduction where I tripped up over my words a couple of times, it is time to find out about the most important part of Ed's World. So, Jessica, tell us a
Yes.
little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a vocal, politically minded person who, has been on the internet for a long time, being quite sorry, the screen is jumping around on me. I've been vocal on the internet for a long time, but the thing about me is I was vocal sort of for the other side. I was a progressive leftist for a really long time. I voted for Bernie Sanders in the 2016 election. And over the course of maybe the last 3.5 years, my ideas have shifted radically. And it's actually surreal for me to say something like that because I don't feel like my ideas have really like shifted that radically. I feel like more or less that, how to say this, the left got up and walked away from me.
I kind
They
of said the
my
same thing.
Yeah, my values didn't change. I still feel like I'm exactly the same person, but I was nominally a Democrat, just like my friends and family around me were nominally Democrats, and they and the ideology that they were subscribing to just seemed to drift really far away from what my sort of original principal values were. So that actually gave me an opportunity to start looking into other ideas and be open minded to sort of different types of thinking. That's something you're not allowed to do in the left in America today, is look for other ideas outside of your own spectrum. And, through watching the events in the news unfold over the last 3.5 years, it's become apparent to me that that sort of progressive ideology has an agenda, and that it's trying to enact that agenda through the news media, through the school systems. And it's become apparent to me that, you can't endorse this, you can't complacently allow it to happen. You have to actually speak up against it. And so I started sort of not getting vocal for the other side, but started pushing it back against what was my own side. And the reaction that I got to that was like, the level of vitriol that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced it when in arguments on the internet with people who oppose them politically. It gets vicious, it gets personal. It's, not something that we're used to dealing. Like, it used to be that people could have disparate political ideas and that they would be okay still remaining friends, and that doesn't seem to be the culture anymore. You have to have friends that are in your own little group, and outside of your own little group, those are unthinkable people, deplorable people. We don't want to talk to these people, and we're being driven into camps. Those camps are not talking to each other. And so my journey is sort of about understanding people who thought differently from me, and I found out that those people don't think that differently than me. We have a lot of the same values. We want the same things, and if your goal is freedom, you're an ally of mine. If you want the ultimate freedom for the individual, then I consider you an ally, no matter what you might call yourself politically. I think that we can have a conversation. And to certain groups with vested interests, that makes me an enemy. I'm an apostate to a religion that I didn't even know that I was part of. So
Well,
that's the long-winded version of my story.
well, then you've taken this a step farther, but I mean, you've been on both sides of the aisle in alternative discourse,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be the chat room. I actually listened to your episode about where you used to be to the
Mm-hmm.
left there. So whether it be an administrator for the chat room or now being vocal in a podcast format as well. By the way, go check out the. Is it your latest episode, or have you released a new one since then?
I haven't released a new one. I usually do it on Monday,
Okay.
but I'm doing this, so this is what it is.
Well, go ahead and check that out over there. It'll be the latest episode where she talks about being in the chat room there. But tell us a bit about how you actually got into alternative media, possibly on the other side, but most definitely on our side.
Okay, so I used to during the early like 2010s, I had become involved in a lot of atheism based chat room groups on Facebook. And one of the largest ones, whose name I won't mention publicly because it's just going to cause me a lot of problems, but they are one of the largest. And in their heyday, they had something like 145,000 active members. And I was an admin for that group. And what part and parcel to internet atheism is progressive leftism. Those two
Hmm.
things, they're two sharks that swim in the same waters. And as I became involved with internet atheism, I also became involved with leftist progressivism. And those ideologies act a lot like cults, not in the sense that someone can hold a gun to your head and make you drink Kool-Aid or anything like that, but the echo chambers behave in the same way that narcissistic cults do. They love bomb you, they, make you believe that you're surrounded by friends, and it's not conscious. People do it subconsciously because you're all kind of doing it to each other. But if you start thinking outside of the approved opinions of the group, they'll start to use your personal things against you. And you become sort of fearful that that love and that acceptance that you got from that group will be drawn away from you, especially when you're in this very like in a position. To say like chat room admin is like a high position is kind of silly, I know, but at the same time, you are told by so many people all day long, oh, you're great, your opinions are great, the things you have to say are great, and it gives you this like I don't know, like serotonin or dopamine. You're just like, oh, I'm accepted, my opinions are thought of well. And it's as long as those opinions remain within as Tom Woods calls it, the 3x5 card of allowable opinions, then you're good to go. But you set foot outside of one of those opinions and you start to be suspicious, or they start to think, oh, maybe you're not you're not really a progressive. And I know that libertarians have a lot of that kind of thing on their side, that you're not a real libertarian. Well, progressives do that stuff too. So you say something outside of the allowed allowed set of opinions, and you start to be questioned. Well, my great sin was that I I think it was in 2017 that Rand Paul, the son, sorry, not Ron, Rand got attacked by his neighbor really violently, and he ended up in the hospital because of it. He had surgery. I think his lung got punctured. He had broken ribs. Like, it was a very violent attack. And like a normal functioning human being, I was like, that's terrible that that happened to him. And this was not what my idea cult that I was in was ready to hear. Within 24 hours of trying, and I was like, this is, why are you celebrating? I was telling these people, why are you celebrating political violence? It's not okay that he got beat up because he's a Republican. That's not okay. That's not the kind of thing I want liberals to be known for, to that we go around and hit people. That's not, the deal. And they're like, well, he's a Nazi or he's a white supremacist. And I'm like, what? This is crazy talk. I mean, this is like the most mild mannered man I've ever heard of in my life. And they're calling, even though I was a progressive and I didn't agree with him, I knew that he wasn't all these terrible things. So, within 24 hours of me saying it's not okay to beat up Rand Paul, I was getting like all kinds of horrible messages, personal, just really like cutting things. My group turned on me. They flipped on me like a gator with prey. It was just overnight, just, and I was reeling from that experience. And it made me realize how I was treating other people. And I said, wow, I have to really examine the way that I interact with people. And I need to start listening to people who don't agree with me and not necessarily assuming that they're coming from malicious intent, because that's what these people were doing to me. They're saying, because you disagree with me, you have malicious intent. Because you're contradicting me, you're attacking me. I said, we have to really examine that thought process. And also, we have to realize that we're as capable of the malevolence that the other side is. When people are being malevolent to us, we're capable of being malevolent back. And so maybe the people on the other side are human beings. And that actually took me like some thinking to get to. And then I got to that thinking. I started talking to other people. I started talking to people who were outside of my idea box, conservatives, anarchists, people like this. They were suggesting books, podcasts. The podcasting world like blew my head open. Because I heard a bunch of ideas that I never would have encountered in my little echo chamber. And a special shout out to the Tom Woods show, because he was especially pivotal in turning my mind onto new ideas, because his delivery is very unassuming, and he was able to kind of like speak to me in a way that was like, I don't assume that you're evil for not agreeing with me, but let me explain to you what some of these ideas are. And I started listening to that show. I started reading like Henry Hazlitt, Murray Rothbard, and people like that. And, kind of before I knew it, I was like, I maybe don't think that the best way to handle poverty is to tax people. I actually kind of think it does sound like theft. And eventually, they say the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist is about 6 months. And I found that especially true with me. I was like, 3 or 4 books in, and I was like, oh yeah, the state is not the way, man. So yeah, I now pretty much consider myself like an anarcho-capitalist in the sort of libertarian Rothbardian tradition. And but I'm learning every day, and I try to be open to ideas that are not my own. And I'll have conversations with people who are communists too. And I acknowledge that anarchism is kind of a left-wing idea too, and they have some historical claim on that. So I enjoy talking to people who have different ideas than me, because I think we all have something we can learn from each other.
Well, with that, we're going to check in with the live chat here before we get into the news. Thank you for that. Looks like I've still got some live chat left over from this morning's episode. Our rated conservative is here, says the mics are good, and he says hello to Jessica. Should check him out at some point here. Reach out to him. He's always looking for guests on his show on Wednesday nights. So,
Cool.
and he also says we should watch his show if we think that mine was a disaster. Uh, Harvey McLeod is here. Art is anything you can get away with. Quote from Andy Warhol. Thank you, Harvey, for that. It's beautiful. Go if you're on Twitch, go check out Harvey McLeod's channel. She does great video games and a lot of good commentary. So check that out. Absolutely. Twits by Brit is here, saying that is cult level scary.
Yeah.
Our rated conservative says she is right on point. And then Ron Helton, my biggest fan, as always, is here. It says echo chamber exactly. And then he says hashtag end the state. So we will check back in with the live chat between topics here. And if you're on Periscope, looks like we're streaming to Facebook, which blows my mind here. So if you're on either one of those platforms, go ahead and head on over to the YouTube, D Live, or Twitch link that you see in the description and come check us out over there, because then we know for sure you are going to get into the live chat. With Facebook and Twitter, it's kind of hit or miss. But let's go ahead and get on into topics. So this past week, we had the debate. Obviously, we're not going to sit here and watch the whole thing because it was 2 hours of pandering, and I would throw up if we tried to do that. But we do have, I did this last time too, I just took NBC's clip reel out of this. And I did the same thing with this one here, because they actually did a good job of hitting all the good points, considering it's NBC and they're trying to make the DNC look good. But they hit the high points here, so let's go ahead and let's watch that. Get this queued up and moving here.
I really am surprised that all of these, my fellow contestants up here, I guess would be the right word for it, given nobody pays attention to the clock. I'm surprised they show up, because I would have thought after I did such a good job in beating them last week.
What's up?
I actually can't hear it. Should I be able to hear it?
Do you have Twitch muted?
I might. Oh, God. Yeah, I do. Go ahead.
Technology.
Week that they'd be a little bit afraid to do that. But I think that Donald Trump thinks it would be better if he's president. I do not think so. Vladimir Putin thinks that Donald Trump should be president of the United States, and that's why Russia is helping you get elected, so you'll lose to him.
Hey, Mr. Putin, if I'm president of the United States, trust me, you're not going to interfere in any more American elections. I'm hearing my name mentioned a little bit tonight. I wonder why. I have opposed authoritarianism all over the world. What I said is what Barack Obama said in terms of Cuba, that Cuba made progress on education. Yes, I think, really? Really?
Yes, because there's no comparing those two
What Barack Obama said is they made great progress on education and health care. That was Barack Obama.
And I am not looking forward to a scenario where it comes down to Donald Trump with his nostalgia for the social order of the 1950s and Bernie Sanders with a nostalgia for the revolutionary politics of the 1960s.
My Secretary of Education will be someone who has taught in public school. My Secretary of Education will be someone who believes in public education. And my Secretary of Education will believe that public dollars should stay in public schools.
I come at this with a great deal of humility because we have had a lot of issues, especially when it comes to racial justice and policing in my own community. And I come to this with some humility because I'm conscious of the fact that there's 7 white people on this stage talking about racial justice.
And I know that if I were black, my success would have been a lot harder to achieve. And I know a lot of black people that if they were white, it would have been a lot easier for them. That's just a fact, and we've got to do something about it than rather just demagogue about it. Let's just go on the record. They talked about 40 Democrats. 21 of those were people that I spent $100 million to help elect. All of the new Democrats that came in, put Nancy Pelosi in charge, and gave the Congress the ability to control this president, I got them.
The fact is, here's the deal. I'm not out of time. You spoke over time, and I'm going to talk. Here's the deal. We've got to deal with the institutional racism.
Vice President. Mr. Vice
I know how you cut me off all the time, but I'm not going to be quiet anymore, okay?
Mr. Steyer.
Prevent North Korea from launching missiles to take them down, and if we don't, why am I stopping? No one else stops.
Okay. Okay, sir.
That's my Catholic school training. 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers from liability. More than all the wars, including Vietnam, from that point on. Carnage on our street. And I want to tell you, if I'm elected and I'm coming for you and gun manufacturers, I'm going to take you on and I'm going to beat you.
We have to acknowledge that we should be renegotiating the New START treaty and the other arms negotiations that must happen. This president just likes to do tweets at 4 a.m. in his bathrobe, gets out there and doesn't achieve the results we need.
I got to point that out there just for a second there. Amy Klobuchar is out of her fucking mind if she thinks Trump is wearing a bathrobe.
Yeah. Also, who doesn't tweet at 4 o'clock in the morning? Come on, get real.
Just another
Yeah.
minute left of this. Let's finish this out.
I would meet with him, but I would do it with our allies. I would have clear deliverables,
Senator
and I would
Klobuchar,
achieve
thank
those
you.
deliverables.
At least I didn't have a boss who said to me, kill it. The way that Mayor Bloomberg
never
is alleged
said
to
that.
have said to one of
Oh,
his
come on.
pregnant employees. People want a chance to hear. People want a chance
you,
to
Senator.
hear from the women who
I
have
never
worked-
said that.
Senator Warren, that is a very serious charge that you leveled at the mayor.
Yes.
You told a woman to get an abortion. What evidence do you have of that?
Her own words.
And Mayor Bloomberg, could you respond to this?
I never said it. Period. End of story.
If we spend the next 4 months tearing our party apart, we're going to watch Donald Trump spend the next 4 years tearing our country apart.
Look.
So where do you want to start?
Oh Lord. Well,
Don't forget to mute your
first
Twitch,
of
by
all,
the way.
I did, yeah. Thank you. I'm getting there. First of all, I'm really pissed off at Amy Klobuchar for dropping out because I had a great Klobucharizard joke and I can't do it anymore. But I think that it's where to start. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think the best place to start is with Bernie because he was the one who was pretty much the focus of the evening. And I know in the first debate that Bloomberg was in, a lot of people said that he had spent $500 million to get kicked around that stage. But the second debate, I feel like it was worth paying that money for him to stand there and tell Bernie Sanders, well, you're a millionaire and you have 3 houses. So I really appreciated that from him. And even if, of course, he doesn't share my values or anything, but I think that was money well spent because then he got Bernie Sanders to actually say, well, every good Vermonter has a summer house. I mean, like, how absolutely elitist does that come off as telling this room full of voters or basically the American people that every good person has a summer home? I mean, come on. It sort of points out that, Bernie, like everyone else on that stage, is there to seek power, there to seek enriching himself. And then as far as the rest of them, they're sort of, dropping off like flies. So
Yeah, you noticed that too, huh?
yeah. We were going to talk, sort of about how, the progression of Buttigieg and the progression of Klobuchar, but these people have, been pressured by their own party, in my opinion, and maybe rightly so, because every debate we get to sit there and poke fun at this and they look at how these people are tearing themselves apart. And maybe it hasn't escaped their notice that they're ripping each other to shreds and pointing out basically all of the problems with their party. And it's not making them look good. They're winning debates for Trump, in my opinion.
Well, one of the funniest parts of this, of course, is the fact that Bloomberg claimed that he won the last debate. I don't know where the hell he got those numbers out of, but...
I think that there are a lot of people making a lot of money off of Bloomberg because it said that he overpays all of his employees. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there are people with a vested interest in telling him how great he's doing and how wonderful he's doing. And, oh, man, you just kicked ass at that. And I'm sure he got the rose-colored glasses version of the debate.
Are you saying that he employs a lot of the Securitron from Fallout New Vegas?
Say again?
The Securitron from Fallout New Vegas?
I haven't done Fallout New Vegas. Oh. I've only played 4. Yeah.
There's an iconic character towards the end game of that game called Yes Man, and he's a robot that's programmed to agree.
To agree with you, yeah. So if you're getting overpaid for your job, to you're just like, yeah, you're doing great. Let's keep this going, no matter how embarrassing it is for you.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with this, and Bloomberg talked about it in the middle of that, one of the things that because I actually came into this debate, I thought it was an hour earlier than it was. And I came into this right when they started pandering, and I just wanted to puke right then and there. And I made my opinions very known on Twitter about that as well. Because, they spent 15 minutes pandering to black people. I believe my exact tweet was, Hey, the Democrats remember that black people existed. Did you see that? They only said it 32 times in 15 minutes,
As they always do at election time. That
especially
just
in a
seems,
state like South Carolina.
yeah, that seems to be the only time they acknowledge the Black community. But I don't think that that's lost on the Black community. And that's why you see a lot of people who are vocal Black conservatives, coming out. I've been, you know, not always like figures like Candace Owens. I don't always agree with all of her takes, of course, but she's been quite vocal in a way that I think is important in addressing the way that the Black community is not attached to, by default, to the Democrats, and that people who are Black are individuals and have their own opinions and have seen the way that things have been going in this country for the last 30 years, and it hasn't been good for a multitude of reasons. We've indeed lost some of the greatness that we once had as an economic powerhouse, as the freest country of the world. These things aren't necessarily our possessions any longer, and that's noticeable by every individual in this country. And so, yeah, I think it's gross for them to do that, of course, but that's their playbook. That's what they've always done. Why wouldn't they try to continue doing that? Because that's what has, what they feel has won for them in the past. So, I wish them luck in their strategy. I don't think it's going to pay off for them, though.
Yeah, no, and I'm pretty sure. And like I say, I was spitting mad when I saw that. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm really glad the rest of the debate wasn't all of that, but I thought that was coming. I thought we were just going to sit there and listen to black pandering for another hour, and then I was going to go back and watch the replay of the first hour and see another hour of black pandering.
Yeah, or maybe they were going to speak Spanish. Everybody was going to speak Spanish for a little
Jesus
while.
Christ.
Just anything to declare your wokeness, to signal your virtues. Like, quick, get the virtue signal.
Speaking of wokeness, Warren seems to have slipped up in the narrative and all of this here. Probably about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the debate, Elizabeth Warren decided she was going to go on the offensive towards Mike Bloomberg again, which is primo hilarious. I love watching that. But, of course, she claimed that she got fired from her job because she became pregnant for the first time. And her principal came out and said, well, okay, go on and have a nice day. But then she slipped up with the narrative and said, well, at least my boss didn't tell me to kill it like somebody else on this stage. And of course, now this is supposed to sit back and paint and demonize Mayor Bloomberg more than his stop and frisk already did for his own self. But what you didn't catch in this here is Warren admitting the fact that her clump of cells was actually a human being.
Yeah, I bet that has her campaign cronies scurrying right now, because that's the narrative, that it's not a human life. So that sort of points out a large problem with the Democratic Party, is that they don't have a united narrative. It's just sort of whatever they think will get them votes at that time. And you see that with sort of like the code switching or the accent switching. Whenever a Democratic politician goes to a different area of the country, they pretend to be a completely different person. And so, now that they're moving into this where they're going to have to appeal to a group of the country, what it will take them to be the Democratic nominee will murder their chances with anybody who's not a hardline Democrat or a hardline progressive. So, they have to signal these virtues. And I think Elizabeth Warren might be a little more devious of a demon than most people take her for. And she understands that at some level, she's going to have to appeal to people who are conservative. If she wants to beat Donald Trump, it's not just about beating the other idiots that are on the stage. It's about, there is a part in the debate where they all were giving their mottos. And one person started with the Bible quote, and then just on down the line, the references to the Bible got lengthier and lengthier, because we were all trying to prove that we knew the Bible at that point. So I think that there's an awareness that they're going to have to appeal to people that aren't progressives. And that is a tightrope for them to walk, because, oops, if she admits that the tiny clump of cells growing inside of her was actually a baby, then how many of her own base does she alienate? But she'll need that if she's to appeal to other people who are not hardline progressives. So
Well, and that's a part of it too. And I think some of these people are starting to realize something that we didn't have in primary seasons previous. Now, of course, we had social media during the last presidential primary and the one before that. But for the most part, when Barack Obama was laying out his agenda, social media was still in its infancy and not everybody had it. So we weren't sitting around and discussing all of this here before. A lot of these people, I think, are starting to realize the fact that they're going to have a hard time moving back to the center if they push out as far into left field as they can, because YouTube and the internet is forever.
yeah,
YouTube can
absolutely.
scrub this right now. They can scrub this video, the replay back when it's done to try and protect the narrative, but it's still going to be on BitChute.
Yeah, and thankfully there are alternative media, alternatives to the mainstream media that are coming out, and people being able to have podcasts like this on venues such as these allows ideas that are not approved to get out there. The gatekeepers no longer have the control that they once did. It used to be that these 4 stations told you what to think. And even though this station kind of said something different from this station, they were all giving you the empire's narrative. And now you have, for example, Joe Rogan was approached by both Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden to do his podcast. And he said that he was not interested in doing it. This is what he said on his own show. He wasn't interested in talking to them. So no amount of money or no amount of influence can get Elizabeth Warren on Joe Rogan's podcast. And he has that kind of influence where he's talking to millions of millions. I mean, CNN would kill for Joe Rogan's numbers, but they can't get it because they're not honest. People know that they're not honest, that they know that the corporate media is the enemy of the people. And the very few kind of groups of people that they do have control over, that's slipping. Because, bacteria can't exist where sunlight exposes. And there's too much light. You can't stop the signal, and the signal's getting out there.
Well, and I think it's even more than just Rogan too, and even more. I think that they are still trying to keep their guard on the narrative with things like that. Let me give you an example. Before I had the podcast, when I was still doing solo videos, I was very much interested in the idea of freshman first-term politicians. I wanted everybody in the House and the Senate to get primaried at some point. So when a woman just a little bit younger than me primaried a 10-term New York representative for the first time and took over to a point where she was almost guaranteed the win, I was very interested in getting her on my show just to talk to her and talk about being a freshman politician and how we can change the makeup of things. And of course, I was blatantly ignored off of this, and part of that was the fact that my channel was starting out, but part of it was the fact that, nobody lets AOC, which is who I was talking about, talk to anybody except for a scripted narrative that's going to pat her on the back and send her softball questions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is never going to be on this show because I'm going to make her work for it.
Well, she's also bought into her own legend at this point. And yeah, so she's very much enjoying being a celebrity. And I am kind of looking forward to the idea that the very few people that voted her in the district will actually be outnumbered by the people who have become aware that she now represents the district. And I am sort of hoping that she will be a one-hit wonder by vote. That would be the outcome that I'm hopeful for with her. Otherwise, I hope that somebody can hope to get a copy of Economics in One Lesson into her hand, because much to prove that the university systems are failing us, this is what passes for an economics major. This is a person who genuinely got an economics degree. And she's, I don't like to cut anyone down with ad hominems, but she's not very smart. And that's all I'll say about that. So I hope that her district will wake up to the fact that that is what is representing them. And she wasn't elected by a great margin of voters. It was not that many people that came out and voted for her.
No, she was elected by Young Turks money.
Yeah, so That depends. It's also a very liberal area, so they might appreciate her in there. I can't speak for people who live so very far away from me because I come from a different culture. That's kind of my idea, is that, New York is not the same country as Georgia. They're very, very different people. So they might want that kind of leadership, but I personally do not down here in the South.
Well, I am actually glad you brought up economics because there's one more memorable quote that I wanted to bring up from this debate before we moved on and talk about before we talked about some other things that happened in the 2020 realm for the week. Uh, One of the moderators actually point blank asked Sanders how he plans to pay for all of his programs, and his quote of the night, the quote that's been clipped thousands of times that I still couldn't find, was, "Oh, you want me to explain how to pay for? How much time do we have?"
Yeah, he needs it because he really doesn't have a clue how that's going to work.
No, he just
He's
wants to paint it up in pretty words so nobody understands what's going on, but they feel good about themselves.
Well, this is a person who praised the systems of Venezuela, and now we see. I mean, you can see what's happening there in the news. You see the bare shelves. I heard an awful story. I don't. I mean, you would have to vet this because I don't know if it's true or not. But I heard that people in Venezuela had become so hungry that they were going in groups to kill cows and bring them home because there was nothing available for them to buy. So they would and I couldn't imagine, if my store shelves were bare, how hungry I would have to be to march out there and go murder a cow. Like, I think cows are lovely. I'll still eat them, mind you. They taste very good. But if I were face to face with a cow, I would have a hard time murdering it. So, that's not something that I praise or would want brought here to the United States. I quite enjoy the availability of goods and food that I have. And I don't know of any socialist system that has ever been able to provide this standard of living. Also, you can look at the last 30 years of the world where markets being made available to all these different countries, such as China and Asia, have raised their standard of living. So we're not just talking about my standard of living, we're talking about global poverty being raised, from the billions to, 750 odd million, I think was the statistic on how many people in the world are living on less than $2 a day, which is what is considered abject poverty. It's been cut almost in half in the last 30 years, which is an astonishing thing. So this rhetoric of capitalism's making us poorer, poorer, and poorer, I'm like, what are you talking about? There are literally 750 million people who are no longer living on less than $2 a day. So it might not be your ideal of life, but it's better for those people.
Well, yeah, and in a capitalist country too. Look down in some of the poorer neighborhoods. I've been in some really, really bad neighborhoods in Milwaukee where everybody's walking around with an iPhone. It might not be the new one, but they all have one.
Sure. Everybody in this country, even if you're very, very poor, has a refrigerator, has an oven. Most people have televisions. Most people have game systems. Like, it's not just to be in this country puts you in the top 1% of wealth, not only of people in the world, but that have ever existed in humanity. We have things, even as people who are not the wealthy people, the billionaires or the millionaires, just regular everyday people have nicer standard of living than the emperors and kings of many generations past. Things are much better than they were just 10 years ago in terms of our access to the different kinds of medical treatments that we have. I mean, I could go on and on about this forever. There's a website called humanprogress.org, and they have a ton of great information that basically shows all, because all you hear is doom and gloom in the news. Everyone's getting poorer, everything's getting worse. It's not. That's a narrative. Things are getting vastly better. And, working toward a future with a mind that is stuck in doom and gloom, you're going to invite that kind of thing. All this, but we have time to sit around and fight about politics because we have time, because we don't have to go out and farm a sustenance living out of the earth. And everyone in the world, unless they're being oppressed by an authoritarian regime such as China, has the opportunity to participate in this global experience of information sharing and digital technology. and DNA, making all kinds of medical treatments of it. I mean, I get really overwhelmed thinking about how positive the future can be if we get our heads out of the sense that the world is coming to an end because we can't agree with each other about some political issues.
Well, that's what I have on the debate, but I want to ask you, who do you think were the big winners and the big losers of the night? And not counting what we have found out in the last couple days about the field.
Right. So, I think Joe Biden has that name recognition going for him, what makes him someone I think that the DNC is still tapping hard to be the nominee. I think that they view Elizabeth Warren as like the Bernie Sanders light, so they would prefer somebody who would just go along with the establishment narrative. Elizabeth Warren doesn't do, because who is it left? It's Bernie, Warren, Biden, and that's it, right?
No, Tulsi's still in too.
Oh, God bless Tulsi. God, my Polynesian princess. I love her ever so. I just think she's hot. Everybody calm down. Yeah, I think that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have very close policies, and that the establishment DNC does not want to see necessarily either of them, take the stand. I don't take the stand. Be the nominee. Be the nominee. Joe Biden is clearly senile, and I heard a theory that the only reason that he was running for president in the first place was so that they could use the fact that he was running against Donald Trump in order to enact the impeachment. That, oh, you're investigating a political enemy who's running against you. Before, when I remember back in Barack Obama's presidency, everybody thought Joe Biden was too dumb to do anything. He just had a reputation, even amongst Democrats, which I was at the time, of being just sort of a dumb guy. You don't let him out in public too much because Uncle Joe's kind of, funny in the brain. And now they're putting him up as the front runner to be president of the United States. I don't think that that's legitimate. So they're left with Warren and Bernie, and the only option they really have is Warren. That's my tentative prediction, is that it will be Warren will be the nominee, which will be a great deal of fun because I think that Trump is ready for that. So.
Well, on that too, and I just developed another question on that concept as well. With only 4 people left in, how do they keep Tulsi off the stage?
Yeah, she hasn't been there the past couple of times, so I think they can just continue with that, and it's fine. They also, have really put that narrative in that she is like a Putin plant and stuff like that. Like, I spend a lot of time reading, chat threads and Twitter threads of people who are progressives. And the narrative that Tulsi is like a Russian plant is a really strong narrative. People believe that. People who are their base believe that. So she's just not going to get, you have to get like delegates and things like that. They're going to say, hey, she didn't get enough delegates. She didn't get enough super delegates, whatever it is. They have their systems in place to be anti-democratic when they need to be. That's pretty much obvious to everyone that they do that. I don't know if anybody saw that guy, Jimmy Dore had it on his program. It was during the Iowa caucus where they were flipping coins. And the guy flipped the coin into his hand, and then he rolled his hand, and everybody just stood there staring at him. Like, yeah, that's the normal way that every human has ever flipped coins forever. And, he's clearly changing the coin, and nobody does anything. Nobody says anything. Nobody does anything. So, these Democrats are clearly willing to bend the rules as necessary to make it the person that they need it to be. Bernie Sanders is an insane socialist. But I personally think he could beat Trump in an election.
I don't anymore. 2016 he could have. 2020 I don't think he can.
I feel that, but I don't think that the DNC would let him anywhere near that opportunity.
Well, Shapiro said it a couple times throughout the week that the whole process that they have with the delegates and the super delegates was put in place to prevent somebody on the far left, like FDR, why they instituted it, from going out and promising free stuff to 51% of the people.
Yeah, this is not stopping them from doing it though. Because I mean, how many people have student loans?
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to a friend of mine lives in Asheville. She's like a pretty hippie kind of leftist chick, and they're real big Bernie Sanders people in Asheville, North Carolina. And she says, I don't know, people just really like the idea that he's going to pay off their student loans. And I was like, ouch. That's as far as people are kind of thinking into it. I'm burdened by this loan. Yeah, I took it out. Yeah, I should pay it back, but I'm burdened by it. And this man is promising me, free pizza, no homework. So I'm going to go with him. It's the same thing that when Obama was running, that's a comment that I had made, is that he's promising free pizza and no homework, and he won. So, this is what Bernie Sanders is doing, and maybe, that's a tactic going back to old Rome.
Yeah.
They would offer bread to all the citizens, and if you were a politician, it behooved you to offer free things to people because they would support you. And it's just a tactic that works on human beings. So even if we know they're doing it, we still are kind of like, yeah, well, I got student loans. Why not? That might appeal to people who say they're conservative on the outside too, but they have a lot of student loans.
Right. So let's talk about the primary now that immediately followed this here. Now, I've got the picture here because Joe Biden took this walking away, which blows my mind completely. Let's get that up here. I actually zoom in on this for myself. Yeah. 48.4% of the vote went to Joe Biden, 256,047 votes, which means he's walking away with 39 delegates. They actually do have it set up now, so all the delegates are distributed. He walked away with 39, and Bernie Sanders walked away with 15.
I mean, yeah, so I don't think that most American people are socialists. I think that it's something that Dave Smith from Part of the Problem had said, that Bernie being the nominee would force the U.S. into a referendum on socialism. Do we really want this kind of system or not? And I think that that's already kind of occurring with people as they're realizing how socialistic Bernie Sanders actually is, because people are digging that out. They're digging out the videos of him spending his honeymoon in the USSR, being like, oh, this is freaking great. The USSR is freaking great. And they're seeing that and saying, this is not the road we want to go down. We don't want to be Russia. We don't want to be Venezuela. And so when it's between the female version of Bernie Sanders and the guy who's not Bernie Sanders, he might be dumb as a post, but at least he's not a socialist. And people are literally picking a senile old man over the socialist. So I think we're already having that referendum. It depresses me that those people had to go and pull a lever for Joe Biden, knowing fully well that he's senile, because I think that's obvious. I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but I think we all know when grandpa is starting to slip. It makes me sad. I feel bad about it. I feel like he should be at home under a blanket reading a book instead of being forced to go through the physical rigor that is a presidential. Now, Bernie had a heart attack doing it. So that it's not easy on the body. And all of these people are as old as dirt. So
yeah, actually, Breitbart had an article, and I put it up in the Discord. I didn't put it in mine. I put it in Generational Gaps. That Joe Biden, according to Breitbart, is the youngest person that's running for, or youngest man that's running for president right now.
Oh God. And this is a problem. Like, we are living in a world that's increasingly digital and computerized and social media based. And I mean, don't tell me that Joe Biden doesn't need somebody to show him how to work Twitter. Like, come on, you need somebody who understands. And, for all of his faults, Trump understands how to work Twitter. And I don't mean that to be some benchmark of like who is fit to rule the free world, but like, I don't think that any individual human being is fit to rule the free world anyway. So at least a guy who is competent enough to put a string of sentence together, first of all. That's not Joe's strong point, that he can put a cogent thought together all in one piece. And then, I don't want to have to see Trump debate Biden, because he's going to destroy that man. And it's going to be painful to watch. At least with Warren, it'll be funny, But Biden, that'll just hurt my feelings, I think.
Well, I keep
'Cause I
saying that
don't,
I think that they're trying to find the Mondale to put up. They know that they can't stop the Trump train right now, so they're just trying to find a sacrifice to put up there.
put Warren up because at least that'll be entertaining. Like I'd love to watch him bat her around, and she's got a little energy to kind of get back at him too, and he can be like, "Oh yeah, well make some powwow chow for everybody," and whatever else it is that he's going to come up with, because he's just going to go to town on her, and I welcome that. She's not senile; she's still got her faculties about her, so it's less like beating up an elderly person. But Trump's elderly too,
Yeah.
so old people fight. Let's do it.
Well, I do kind of want to watch that Joe Biden taking Trump behind the gym, like he claims he's going to do.
Oh my God! They're gonna box like this too. They're gonna have like old man boxing. It's gonna be great.
Well,
How about you?
we've talked exclusively about three candidates because we've had a shift in the field. And of course, the first thing that we need to do is talk about Tom Steyer. And the reason we need to talk about him first is because I found the video clip of him dancing and I think it's fucking hilarious.
Oh yeah,
So I'm going to show it.
put that up.
There was no point for me showing that other than the fact that I wanted to embarrass Tom Steyer more. There was literally no other point to that.
Oh my God, that's so great. You want to appeal to young people so bad, and it's just so cringy. Like it's not organic at all. Oh, hilarious though. Very entertaining.
Well, one of the best things that I've seen come out of the fact that Tom Steyer has dropped out at this point is the fact that now people are trying to insist that he needed to do certain other things with his own money rather than run for president. Like all the good that he could have done with all the money, and he dumped a ton of money into it. Of course, he's been outspent 3-1 by Bloomberg, but still, he has dumped a good deal of money into this. And he could have built houses with that. He could have donated to that. He could have employed people. He could have just all sorts of things that Twitter says that, or say that Tom Steyer should have been doing instead of running for president. I got hiccups. Excuse me.
No worries. Yeah, I think that there is something to that, but if you're running for president, you're also trying to like exercise power over 350 million Americans that kind of think you deserve to be cleaned out. Whether that money goes to a charitable donation or not, of course it would be better if it did. But at the same time, like maybe you deserve to take that hit because like you wanted to rule. And if you come for the throne, there has to be, I don't know, some kind of, but then again, that's how they play it, that you have to have all this money to become president too. So, I'm torn about that. They have systems in place to prevent grassroots candidates from coming up anyway. So even if you did gain organic popularity the way that like Tulsi Gabbard did, for example, they just do everything they can to keep you out. They themselves are too well funded. So yeah, if you try to hold that wolf by the ears and it bites you, well, that's what you get.
Well, speaking of people that are dropping out at this point here, I got home late last night and I hadn't heard anything about this to find out that it was trending on the side of Twitter that Mayor Pete has decided that he is going to suspend his campaign.
Hi. Yeah. I mean, is he even a real person? Like, where did he come from? He just appeared out of the ether and, oh, we'll elect him because, he's gay? And I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is.
I don't even buy that he's gay, to be completely honest. I think he was a manufactured candidate to sit up on the top and try and energize one demographic of people to come out and show up. I don't know if he was making a serious run for this or not, but out of nowhere he won Iowa, which I can understand that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he had a very normal baseline milk toast kind of personality. So when you have this field of people who do seem kind of radical, it's like, okay, he seems the most like what we've dealt with before, which is Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's been accused of even like straight up plagiarizing the things that Obama had to say,
Right.
which I don't think it's that he was plagiarizing. I think that they all just kind of borrow from the same rhetoric. So there's only so many ways to combine those words together. And, what's that student's program that tells you if you're plagiarizing or not?
I have
But
no idea.
yeah, there's a program you can put your papers into, and they can tell you if like your wording is too close to somebody else's stuff. He got popped on that basically. But like I said, it's rhetoric. So there's only so many ways for you to put it together. And he sounded like Obama, and I think that to a lot of people that they want to go back to something they recognize as safe. And that, yeah, I can understand him winning that too.
Well,
Also, sorry, go ahead.
the thing that you had to know with Pete too, and why he waited until after South Carolina, he had to know going into South Carolina that being homosexual, or at least acting like he's homosexual, going into a state that's largely populated by Baptist and Pentecostal black people, was not
Yeah,
going to fare well for him.
big fan of the liberal gays. Yeah, for sure. He, you know, and interestingly, the people who are Democrat and who aren't gay, the demographic that he would have been meant to appeal to, I've seen posts on Twitter from that group saying, well, he's not the right kind of gay. Well, to be fair, her statement was, I don't want to say that Pete is not the right kind of gay, but. And according to one of Michael Malice's laws, any political statement made before the word but can be disregarded.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, she was saying, Pete's not the right kind of gay. And I was like, yeah, I know he's not. You want him to be, secretly an Antifa, but he's not. I'm sorry. He's just a robot in a suit. I don't, have anything else for you on that. But,
Amy
go ahead.
Klobuchar and all of her attacks that she made to him on the past debate stages did have some inspiring words to send Pete off. According to Amy Klobuchar's Twitter, Pete Buttigieg has run an inspiring and historic campaign. I have so much respect for you, Pete Buttigieg, and I know there are great things ahead, and both John and I are big fans of Chasten. Now, I grew up on the Minnesota border, and I spent 18 years there. That is Minnesota nice for fuck you,
Yeah.
drop dead.
Yeah, we have something similar in the South. And that's a bless your heart if I've ever seen one. And wasn't she the one who was asking him, what do you think, I'm stupid?
That is the same.
And she did that. That was so intentional and very strategic on her part, because she's like, I'm a woman and you're contradicting me. And you're just not following the narrative, are you, Pete? And so it's like, is he gay or is he a white man? Which of these things are working against him or for him right now? Because that's the left's whole trip right now, is your identity points, your privilege points. What's the over under? And I thought that was really strategic on her part, but it doesn't matter. They're both out anyway.
Yes,
So.
that is the other thing. Is a couple hours before we went live, we got the news that Amy Klobuchar has decided that she no longer wants to run for president. Now, it's been interesting, and I've been looking into this a little bit, and I actually saw in the live chat here a bit ago that Ron Helton had said the same thing. Both of these candidates have pledged their delegates to Joe Biden.
Yeah, that does not surprise me, because, like I said earlier, I don't think that a lot of people think the establishment wants Warren. I do not think that. I think she literally stands there as like a female version of Bernie Sanders. I think they are trying hard to go with Biden.
Well, and I've told the story numerous times as well. I told it last week, and I will keep telling it, that, yeah, I come from a union house. My parents are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. That I actually just talked to them about this and told them I keep citing them because they don't watch the show. They don't know how, I don't think.
Well, my mom's not going to watch the show either. So,
But they continue to say I mean, I talked to my mom when Elizabeth Warren first got in. I talked to my mom about this, and they're the vote blue no matter who, and she's like, "Well, I hope that she doesn't get in because I can't stand that woman."
Yeah. That does not surprise me. She has like that very like nasty school teacher scolding thing, and she was a school teacher, so
Yeah.
maybe that's what she picked it up from. But you feel like you're being scolded by her, and that's the voice of the progressive left if I've ever heard it. Is just a mean scolding school teacher. It's like you're bad, and no one wants that. So. God, Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, I don't think that the Democrats like her. I think that they underestimate, again, flyover country, as Hillary Clinton so expertly named it, that these people don't share the values of like the coastal elites. And Elizabeth Warren is blowing that horn hard. So she's not going to appeal to people in the Rust Belt. She's not going to appeal even to Democrats in the South. That's not all she can really get is, places that are going to be like, Seattle, places that are already dyed in the wool progressive, way further left than the rest of the country. There's this whole middle of the country, which is just regular workaday people who are nominally Democrat just because that's sort of what they always been. They don't really think that deeply into politics. And so she comes out sort of espousing some of the rhetoric that she does, appearing, again, to me, she's just the female Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders light. She's the light version of that. They'll go with her before they'll go with Bernie, but they're going to have to go with Joe because he can appeal to a wider group of people. I think to get the progressives, you would have to murder yourself with the rest of America, and they're not trying to do that. They do still want to beat Trump.
Well, now that we know who's all out here, this has completely changed how I look at Super Tuesday, which is coming up tomorrow. So, who do you think? How do you think Super Tuesday pans out now with only the 4 people left that are running?
Well, I mean, really, we can say it's 3 people. As much as I love Tulsi, and I think that she's a thorn in the side of the establishment, and she gave Hillary Clinton a bloody nose publicly, and I will always adore her for that. She's not really a real candidate. The other 3, the aged ones, yeah, I think that Biden has that recognition as something that's not far left socialism, and not that many people really want to sign up for that kind of thing because I do think that they recognize that capitalism has raised their standard of living. So they're going to go for Biden. And I think that the vote that we've just seen, the 40, what did you say, 39 or 49% went to Biden? That's indicative of what we're going to see in the future as this like panders down. And of course, like Bernie bros, they're going to be like, oh, Bernie was cheated. Bernie was cheated. Yeah, probably. But at the same time, they're trying they're trying to win. They can't win with you. They can't win with you now. Like you said, maybe in 2016, Bernie would have had the stuff to pull it off. Trump is too well established and has done too many good things. He has taken a lot of people who were against him in the beginning and turned them to him. And the Democrats have acted a damn fool for the last 3.5 years, which has given them a lot of people have walked away from them. So I think Trump has too strong of a showing. And, like you said, maybe they're just trying to put up a Mondale because they have nothing else.
Well,
it's really pathetic.
That's the thing, too. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I think, right now, like I said, in 2016, coming off the recession, where nobody was working still at the time, where we're still at 5-6% unemployment at the time,
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders would have had a great showing at the time. And I don't think he can do that now because he's running on a political revolution and an economic revolution at a time where everybody's at work. Where everybody's got good money. Like we have the lowest unemployment in history. Now, yes, you could put a stuffed suit Democrat like Joe Biden in there at this point, and he could possibly get some traction because he's going to run on the wedge issues, gun rights, and taking your guns away, and gay rights, and this and that. Whereas Bernie's just going to come up and say, well, I'm going to revamp the economy at a time of epic prosperity.
Yeah, that's going to be a really tough road for him to hoe because, like you said, there has been a great deal of economic prosperity. More people are back to work. And also, he's done something that we talked about at the beginning, how Democrats kind of pander to the Black community while they're trying to win an election, and then it's just nothing else. Trump has passed reforms in criminal justice. He has passed reforms and focused on improving the state of the Black community. And I think that it's going to be very tough for them to turn around and say, hey, minority community, come with us who did nothing for you for 8 years before this, away from what has been provably an improvement in the state of things. I mean, Trump, that's something, of course it's to his political benefit to do so, but Trump has made improving the state of the Black community a focus of his. And that's something that the sort of the woke scolds of the left want to pretend that, we need leftism in our leadership because we want this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But when Trump actually does that thing, where he actually focuses his energy on the Black community, they don't talk about that. They don't report that. They don't give him any credit for the things that he's done. And they have nothing but negative things to say. And I think it's going to be really hard for a person who benefited from some of this effort to turn around and tell them, no, but come on with us because, you're a white supremacist if not. Yeah. Well, it's going to be a tough thing to tell the Black community.
Well, and the thing that I think there are a lot of people that still don't like Trump. I know when we were talking about, I was talking to my mom the other day, and she said, well, I told her, I said, I keep telling people, I think you guys would leave the top of the ticket blank before you would vote for Trump. And yeah, my dad just came out right out and said, yeah, no, I'm not going to vote for Trump, no matter what. But I think a lot of people are just going to swallow their pride and in the privacy of the booth, pull that lever for Trump.
I think people will do that. And I think there are also a lot of people who will vote for Trump just to give a big FU to the Democrats, because the behavior over the last 3.5 years has been abominable. And they've put the country through these impeachment proceedings and, all of this, like every day it's something new, from the Russian P claims all the way down to impeachment. And it's cost the American people millions and millions of dollars, all this effort and time and energy. And it's shown them to be the political opportunists that they are. And people are just like, screw that. That's how I was. I'm like, I'm not participating in this any longer. You no longer have my vote. You're no longer entitled to my agency as a voter. So in the meantime, I've actually become an anarchist. So nobody's entitled to my agency as a voter any longer. But they've definitely, they lost me. It's not that somebody else won me over. They lost me. And I think that's the case with a lot of people.
I'm glad you brought up people being entitled to your vote at this point, because that's the last thing that I want to talk about before we move out of this topic and go pay attention to our horribly neglected live chat here. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, the 2020 Watch has become an hour segment, and there's just so much going on there. But the last thing I want to talk about here is the fact that there may be some, I don't know, different things going on with the votes as per se. A lot of these states that are coming up on Super Tuesday are open primary. You don't have to be registered to a party to vote on their ticket. And a lot of them, much to the dismay of Joe Walsh, are also not having GOP primaries. Now, my state, Wisconsin, does not vote on Super Tuesday. They do not vote until, I believe it is the first week of April, for the presidential primary. We are not having a GOP primary here. I'm going to walk into my polling place and pick up a Democrat ballot, and whichever one of the three idiots that's running and is at the lowest is going to get my vote, just to shake up the numbers.
Interesting. It's an interesting strategy. Are you doing that because you're hoping that the weakest candidate will be picked?
No, I'm just doing that to keep the weakest candidate in the fight so they keep tearing each other down forever. I want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, no, that's and it provides a lot of fodder. And that was kind of the point that I was making earlier, is I think that, Klobuchar and Buttigieg dropping out have a lot to do with saying to these people, hey, you guys are tearing this party apart. What if instead of you being president, which you're not going to be, we offer you some other kind of position later on in the cabinet or whatever it is? And so there's a lot of influence to pass around to make somebody who's in the second or third tier kind of like drop out. And I mean, Andrew Yang, for example, the day after he announced that he wasn't running anymore, he has a segment, or he's involved in segments on CNN now. So he's, you know, he's got a CNN gig to do. And
And
so
he's
they
still
have
got a
things.
hardened voting base too. He's got a
Yeah.
hardened base in all the Super Tuesday states that say they're going to vote for him no matter what, whether he's on the ticket or not.
God bless the Yang people. They're pure of heart. I think that they want. I've never met one who was like a jerk, which is awesome. Like, you know, a lot of Sanders people or Hillary people or whatever that can be really vicious, but Yang people seem all right. Like, I would have a beer with them. They're wrong. Like, they don't understand economics, and they're wrong, but they're nice people. And Andrew Yang, him kind of like jumping over to be on CNN all the time now, that put a dent in my heart because I felt like maybe he wasn't one of these lizard people, like one of these, you know, just absolutely bought and paid for political types. But he clearly is. And the corporate media and the political establishment are in bed together. So him going over and taking a gig over there is just so like, man, what a sellout. What an absolute sellout you are. And, you know, $1,000 would have been nice for everybody, I suppose. I did read one article. I wish I remember where it was that said that if we ended the welfare system and went to the the universal income thing, that it would actually work out to be cheaper. And I'm not sure if the math works out on that or not because the math is not my strong suit. But I thought that that would be interesting. Like, what if it really did make things cheaper? You just ended the welfare system completely, which would be a fantastic step in the right direction because that is so overblown and complicated and needs to be, you know, wiped out entirely. And then, you know, you gave people kind of a step down, which is like the universal basic income or whatever. But that would be a lot easier to remove than the whole leviathan of a welfare state that we have now. You know, it's just, you could step it down. But, you know, these are my dark plans if I were in charge, but nobody smart or with money would put me in charge. So
All right. So the last thing I always do on this segment is I ask the same three questions to everybody who's ever been on this show. And now your choices are quite limited this time, unfortunately. We don't have the vast field of 16 that we had just a couple weeks ago. So the first question is based on statistics, based on what you've seen in the last elections, and based on the news cycle you've seen for the last week. Who do you think out of the four wins the Democrat nomination by statistics?
I think it's going to be Joe Biden. As things stand as they are now, I think Biden has a really solid shot.
Okay. Now, if you had to have one of these four people, for whatever reason, if say the Trump had the stroke and he couldn't run again and Pence couldn't pull it together, if you had to absolutely have one of these four people, who is the lesser of four evils?
Definitely Tulsi. I mean, Tulsi wants to end the regime change wars, and you know, the other things we can negotiate with her about. I don't like her Second Amendment stances, and I don't like her Medicare for all stances, but she does want to end the wars, and that is something that I haven't heard. I mean, Bernie a little bit, maybe. I mean, he talks about the Iraq wars being a mistake, but I don't hear any rhetoric from him necessarily about his active plans to end those wars. Whereas Tulsi Gabbard has a on the ground knowledge of that problem and could possibly work toward ending those wars. But you know, here we are getting ready to sign a peace deal with the Taliban, fragile as it may be. That looks like it may be coming eventually to an end. And so, you know, I think if that's your issue, I mean, I don't know that Tulsi necessarily beats Trump on that. So
Yeah, I talked a bit about the Taliban thing this morning on Contemporary, but I don't even have it vetted enough to where I could have put it in the itinerary. But yeah, that's incredible as well.
and like I said, I've just kind of heard passingly about this, but yeah, I mean, they've from what I've heard, they've apparently hit some snags already. There's some prisoners that they're negotiating the release of, and that's not going well. And it's going to be a bumpy road. But if they're in the process, if they're even talking about peace and ending hostilities, that's a world away from where we were 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm for it. I really want that to be a focus and like getting our troops out of an area of the world that they don't belong in right now.
All right. And the last question is always for the lulls.
Yes.
out of all four of them, it's not really all of them anymore, but out of these four candidates, for the pure entertainment value, for the laughs, and for the epic moments that you're going to see on the debate stage, which one of these four idiots do you want to see as the nominee?
Oh, Warren. Oh, please let it be Warren. She's got a little fight in her. She's a scrappy little cat, so I think that it will be very entertaining. And I think Trump might make her cry, which I think would be really funny. So, that's just purely for my enjoyment. Obviously, I'm a little bit of a sadist, so what are you going to do?
All right, we have got to check in with the live chat, and there's a bunch here. Might have to refresh DLive on my tablet because we might actually have quite the payout here from the cryptocurrency in the chest. Because cryptocurrency on DLive is generated by the chat. That's how it's mined.
Oh,
So,
see, this is things I don't know about.
Yeah.
You'll have to teach me about this.
So yeah, we will definitely have to get that refreshed and get that distributed tonight. So everybody who wants cryptocurrency, head on over to the DLive side. Let's see, where were we here? Echo chamber exactly, and the state. I can't read all of this. We've got way too much, which I love that. But we're going to be looking for questions, and we're not going to do every comment this time. Or we'll get the highlights too, like Ron Helton saying, "Idiocracy's here. These Democrats are unhinged."
Absolutely.
Warren against abortion for all of 12 seconds, thanks to tweets by Brit.
I know.
Bernie just exposes what a hypocrite and dishonest person that he is when he's promoting socialism. He's okay with giving your money to others, thanks to Ron Helton.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Tweets by Brit. Warren can't keep her story straight. Guess it's time for a powwow with her campaign. Oops, too soon. Let's see. Hard to believe anybody would support, much less give money to get her elected. Hillbot 2.0. That is thanks to Ron Helton. Okay, you've been named by name here. Tweets by Brit says, absolutely, Jessica, you're so right on about the media and influence. Let's see. I love this. So you're already conservative. She's a moron and can't think for herself. The highlight of the AOC Biscuit's life was being a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah, and let's not talk about how expensive her wardrobe is as she goes around talking about income inequality. Let's not talk about that.
Ron Helton says Tulsi is the black horse candidate. Whoever gets the Democratic nod will be smart to make her the VP pick. I won't. I don't know if he meant to say won't vote for him, but he says want vote for them.
Probably won't.
Tweets by Brit says Tulsi's my new favorite supervillain. Tulsi coming back to the debate stage sounds like some reality TV script, thanks to Ron Helton.
Yeah.
And there was Klobuchar promised her delegates to Biden. We read that already. Biden reading a book. They'll have to hand him a book and tell him what he read when he finishes stumbling over the words.
If he can keep his teeth in.
Yeah. Tweets by Brit says 2 years into a Biden presidency would just be corn pop stories at the State of the Union and incoherent rage. Biden versus Trump boxing would be that Simpsons episode where the old GI and the Nazi are fighting to the death. That was Family Guy, not Simpsons.
Yes, I know what he's talking about, though, and that's perfect. That is the perfect analogy.
The outraged conservative says stick a comb in Klobuchar. She's done.
That shit is made out of cement. You cannot get a comb in there.
Tweets by Brit says, yes, she's the mean teacher. She's the Karen of presidential candidates.
Yeah. Big Karen energy.
Tweets by Brit says, I'm wondering when, if Warren or Bernie is going to bring up that Obama hasn't come out and endorsed Biden yet.
Ooh.
Let's see what else. Harvey McLeod says Warren is going hard for that VP nomination. Ron Helton says vote never seems to matter anyhow. These promising free stuff are the ones who get elected here. Harvey McLeod says I think it's going to be Bernie who's going to get butt fucked again, and then it's going to be Biden. You don't have to censor that, Harvey. This is Ed's world. We're free here.
We say butt fucked on Ed's World.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about coronavirus, which
Yeah, let's talk
unfortunately,
about it.
Corona, the beer company, is suffering losses because of the name of coronavirus.
Yeah. But how many people trolled the poll though? Because if I had been offered that poll, I would have answered like, with the intent to be funny. So
Yeah.
I would like to believe that that many people are not that stupid. And even if that I have to lie to myself to believe that, I'm going to do it because that hurts.
Well, we've got the first deaths been reported in the United States. A 30-year-old woman in Washington State has passed away from the virus, which means it's run up the West Coast and gone to Washington State, which is scary. But they are having what they're having here. We now have. Let's get the statistics on the world. So at this point, we're at 90,308 cases worldwide, and that is just before we went live. I took this screen grab. 3,087 deaths, still mostly in China, and 45,726 people have recovered as of today. Which now we're starting to realize that recovery doesn't necessarily mean it's out of your system as people are getting sick again.
Yeah, that's unusual too. I'm not, of course, a medical expert, but I've never heard of once you're over something that you continue to be a contagion to people around you, which makes it really interesting that Fox News had a recovery on and he had his small child in his lap.
Yeah.
He's continuing to cough and sharing a water bottle with him, and I can feel my soul leaving my body as I'm watching this because I'm like, hey, didn't they just report that it's still in your system afterward? Also, I talk a lot on my Twitter feed about being, prepared for natural disasters. And humanity is due for a room clearing plague. It happens that things that, as high as our medical technology has gotten and are as tight a control as a government might have, such as they have in China, which is very tightly controlled, these things do not sort of obey the laws of the government. Government control cannot necessarily stop the spread of illnesses as much as it might try. So I talk a lot about being prepared. Long before coronavirus ever became a thing, I was telling people, hey, it's always a good idea to be prepared for a natural disaster, whether that takes the form of a storm, whether that takes the form of a virus. Now, I don't think that, I don't necessarily think that I'm going to get coronavirus. I live in the middle of nowhere and I'm a housewife, so I'm pretty much in my house. But I do think that it could cause supply shortages. And it kind of brings up an interesting point that Donald Trump has, for the last 3.5 years, been in a concerted effort to make sure that not all of our supplies come from China. Not everything that we buy comes from China. And now we're in a position where I think it's 20 different pharmaceuticals that we have here in the US are completely made by China. Both the precursor and the drug are made by China. So if something goes wrong in China, that's, most of these deaths and most of this illness is occurring over there. The disruption is occurring over there. But if that happens, that could leave people who are the recipients of these 20 different medications completely without medication. So while I don't think it's necessarily a danger that people are going to contract the illness, I do think that supply shortages are a thing that can happen. People don't realize how fragile the supply chains are. And one hiccup somewhere else in the world can affect the delivery of goods to this country here. And, maybe it makes sense that not everything we consume be made in one place. And so it's kind of hilarious to me that Donald Trump has been saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't have everything made in China. And now it's kind of being shown that, like, hey, this is maybe why you don't want to have
Yeah.
everything centralized in one location.
Now we're seeing, speaking of things on the supply chain being interrupted. Wow, I can't talk right now. Suddenly, speaking of the
Okay,
supply
I'm on my
chain being,
second beer, so
yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
speaking of the supply chain being interrupted here, we have seen a 3,000 point dip in the Dow over the last week, which is incredible. And all of the other markets have followed suit at this point. But there again, I mean, you're not getting your cheap stuff from Wish right now either. You got to keep in mind. So if you're not getting that, you're not getting anything else over here. And I mean, I would have sold off.
Yeah, absolutely. And the market is based how well it's doing is based on confidence. And right now, people are confused because the reputable sources, being the CDC, the president, the different corporate media sources, they report different things. So, with the example, that woman being 30 years old who died of the coronavirus, there were reports that came from the president, that came from the CDC, that came from Washington State. They were all different. First, it was a girl, and then it was a woman, and then it was a man, 50 years old, 30 years old, 19 years old. So there's a lot of information being thrown around that contradicts. And all of these sources are supposed to be the reputable source, and it contradicts. So the market is unsure. And absolutely, yeah, I would too, because there seems to be something, whether or not the disease itself becomes something that affects everybody in the population, the supply chains are already being interrupted. My husband's company, for example, a lot of their customers are in China, and a lot of their supply comes from China, and they're already experiencing shortages in materials. So it's not something that's not going to affect the way that the U.S. operates. And the time to make sure that you and your family are taken care of is now. I'm not saying that you need to go out and get 10 years worth of MREs and keep them in a basement somewhere. I'm just saying have some extra supplies that way just in case these things are not on the shelf later for you to go get them, you have some in your house. Now, I don't think that everybody running out to go grab stuff off the shelf is necessarily a good idea either. Grab a couple of things. Daily life, the more we panic, the more it becomes disrupted, the more we feed into that supply chain disruption. So until you have a reason to behave differently, just act as though you have a snowstorm coming. I mean, I don't know. In Atlanta, when we get a snowstorm, things shut down for a couple of days. I mean, completely shut down. The white stuff falls, and we are like, oh no, and we stay inside of our houses. But the snow melts a couple of days. You got some bread, you got some milk, you make some grilled cheeses, and then you go back to work a couple of days later. I think that level of preparation, at the very least, is something that we should be doing all the time anyway. You should be prepared for something to happen. It's not necessarily like fear mongering or panicking. If you just kind of say, hey, this is a good reminder that I should have 3 days worth of water in my house if I don't already. And if you do, okay, cool, you're good to go. You probably don't need to get 100-gallon water barrel or, MREs to last you the next 25 years. It's probably overkill. But make sure that if it's necessary, you have something to sustain yourself. I don't think that that's such a crazy idea.
Yeah. So, what do you think about all of left-wing Twitter running around now accusing the Donald of calling this whole disease a hoax?
Yeah. So what is he supposed to do? Incite a panic? He's supposed to be like the sky is falling, and then everybody goes and buys everything up off the shelves, and then, that would really, people don't want a panic. If a panic happens, things are going to, like a national panic, could you imagine? Most places only have 3 days worth of supplies anywhere for like perishable items and things like that. And if people panic, they're going to hoard things. They're going to, things are going to get stupid. And that in it of itself could make things get bad for people. It doesn't have to be necessarily that you're going to contract a virus for things to get bad. Panic itself. I mean, there's a great Twilight Zone episode about this, where people think because their power has gone out that aliens or Russians, I don't remember exactly what it was, but something is coming to get them. And they get so paranoid and so scared that they start turning on each other. And panic does funny things to people.
Oh, absolutely.
So until there's a reason for people to do that, panic itself could be our enemy. And I don't think that it's fair to say that I don't think Trump called it a hoax. I listened to his statements on it. And what he said was, we're as prepared as we can be. We'll let you know if there's more to know. Otherwise, be prepared. And I don't think that that's saying that it's a hoax.
Well, they're going after a tweet that he came out and where he did say that everything was a hoax, but he wasn't talking about the disease itself. He was talking about the manufactured crisis that the Democrats are making the disease out to be.
Yes.
And I mean, some of these left-wingers, I've read some of them, are just absolutely screaming about this bloody murder, about the fact that he said this, and he says that the whole disease is a hoax, and it's I don't know. They think that he thinks it's just the common cold or something.
No, and obviously, he's talking about, I have appointed this task force, which I have comments to make on that, but we'll get back to that later. In my opinion, he's doing everything that he can do. I don't think that I think there is a limit to what governments can do in these cases.
Mm-hmm.
That, humanity itself is kind of, we're due, in terms of the overuse of antibiotics and all kinds of flaws in our medical system. We are due for a room clearing fart like you wouldn't believe. Okay, so he's, in my opinion, done everything in his physical possibility, but still acknowledged, that there's stuff that we can't control. And the appropriation of $8 billion more is not necessarily going to mean that no one is going to get the coronavirus. And I think a lot of that surrounded how much money Trump had wanted to appropriate for provision for this. And he had appropriated something along the lines of $2 billion, and they had wanted him to appropriate 8. Okay, well, and what is $6 billion more going to get you? Well, I'm sure that buys you dinners and trips and all the other things that government officials spend money on. But, hey, I'm actually kind of on his side where he's like, hey, we don't need to appropriate billions of dollars we have systems in place. Those systems will be as good as they can be, but this is really, reliant on how people act. Are we doing the behaviors that will spread this virus? Are we going on trips? Are we, observing the kind of cleanliness that we should in public? There are a lot of things that people can do to protect themselves. And if they, you can always rely on people to fuck up, though. You can always rely on that guy with coronavirus to get on the plane and share his water bottle with everybody. And I just don't think that the government can prevent this. And so yelling at Trump, that's part of the Trump derangement syndrome. That's part of the narrative that Trump needs to be wrong about everything. And, oh my God, if anyone gets coronavirus, which they're gonna, but obviously it's already spreading. We know it's spreading. People have come here from China. My husband had a coworker directly. I have a direct connection to Wuhan because his coworker was in Wuhan a week before Trump closed the borders. And that guy came home and he started to feel sick. And he did go and get himself tested. He doesn't have coronavirus and he's no longer ill. So we don't necessarily need to worry about that. But anybody who's played any of these like Contagion or Plague games knows it's already here. There's nothing we can do about it. So this just feeds into the Trump narrative of Trump is bad, Orange Man bad. And if anybody gets coronavirus, we can say, oh, well, Trump didn't take that extra $6 billion. Well, I don't think that's going to make the difference here, personally.
Well, we've already talked about the supply runs and gouging, which I have on the notes here. But I kind of want to hear these comments about the task force at this point. You baited me, and now I want to hear it.
So I think the reason that anybody appoints a task force in the first place is so that you have someone to fire when stuff goes wrong. So, for example, in my state of Georgia, Governor Kemp appointed an 18-person task force. And I had commented that, behold your 18 sacrificial lambs. And basically when shit goes tits up, that's who gets fired. And it's just so that you have like a hedge, someone to be the sacrificial animal when, so that it's like, oh, well, I appointed this guy, but he was a fuck up. So now he's got to get out of here. But all that means is they don't feel that they can control the situation. Because if they did, they would take that on themselves. They would say, I control the situation. They know they don't control it. So they appoint a guy. And that's what happened in China. They appointed a coronavirus task force guy. And then when shit went tits up, they said, oh, we got to fire him. And he resigned and he bowed and he said, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, we'll get him out of here. It's not the fault of the communist regime. It's that guy. So, I think that's what's going on there. And I heard task force and I was like, oh, shit, they don't have this under control at all. They really don't. And they don't, but most people, obviously it's like a flu. If you're in a vulnerable category, you need to be extra careful. If you're a small child or you're a really old person, you need to be extra careful. But most people are recovering from it. So it's not like, even if it does spread, which it's going to, that you're necessarily in danger of dying. I don't want anybody to panic. I think panic can be just as bad an enemy as any virus. So, get some rice and beans. It's like Tim Pool says, get some rice and beans. The worst thing that can happen to you is you're prepared for taco night for the next couple of months. It's not like anything bad happens to you if you prepare. If you don't prepare, then you don't have beans and rice. And then you're hungry and stupid. So don't be hungry and stupid.
Unfortunately, there is no preparewiththat.com yet. Maybe that'll come somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
All right, let's check the live chat here again. It looks like we got some stuff going on here. Let's see. Helton says, Tulsi wants to end the wars while still remaining in uniform to collect that sweet pension. She's still supporting the mission by staying. Harvey McLeod says that was Family Guy and was a parody of Apt Pupil. Which I'm not
By the way,
familiar with.
that guy about the Tulsi remark, I think that's an apt criticism. She did get into the war, before, and she has seen the folly of it, but I agree that she stays employed with it. So I think that's a fair criticism.
So I was going to skip small comments like this, but I got to read this thread here because it's hilarious. Harvey McLeod says, I know I'm trying to clean up my vernacular. Buttigieg should get behind Biden, and it's going to be long and hard, and it's going to be raw and emotional. With a large amount of rainbow emojis after that.
That's good. Well done. Well done.
Von Helton says, I haven't seen any large crowds at the local store yet. We will be running short on electronics and other widgets for sure. Harvey McLeod says, the same with 911 operators. They're criticized for being emotionless and stale when that's 100% why they are. They don't want to incite more panic.
Right. Absolutely.
Ron Helton identified the Twilight Zone episode you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is in episode 22 of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, he's right. That's the episode. And it's on YouTube. I think all of the Twilight Zone is on YouTube. So check that one out. It's a good one.
That was taken from a Styx comment this morning. Can't take all that. I must have missed that one because I listened to Styx this morning. I got off camera and I turned on Styx. And I must have missed that one. All right. Let's go on to... What else do we have on the list here? Oh. The Young Turks.
Sorry.
I thought about how I was going to present this. I thought about it all day while I was looking for a video. I was trying to get commentary from Cenk when I was trying to get visual aids up. I couldn't find commentary from Cenk in video. But what I did find was Ben Shapiro doing a much better job of presenting this than I ever could. So I'm going to defer to the snarky Jewish man. Let me get the video up.
We begin at this hour with a piece of delicious news. Very, very delicious. So, Cenk Uygur is the founder of a group called the Young Turks. It's a show that's been promoted by YouTube. They funded it. Cenk's channel has been very popular for a long time. If you ever want to see a video of me debating Cenk, I debated him at Politicon maybe 3 years ago. Anyway, Cenk is a far-left dude. He's running for Congress in the old seat that Katie Hill occupied, the woman who just had to step down for apparently engaging in a corrupt menage a trois with one of her staffers. Well, now he is running for the Democratic nomination for that seat. He endorsed Bernie, then Bernie endorsed him back. Then it turned out that Cenk had said a bunch of stuff that people found offensive, so Bernie promptly threw Cenk overboard. Well, Cenk has made his entire career off of being a wildly progressive voice, spending his time on the evils of money and politics and the joys of unionization. Unfortunately for Cenk, he operates a business. And that led to this delicious little scenario today, according to the Huffington Post. Top leadership at the progressive news network, the Young Turks, held an all-staff meeting at its office in Culver City, California, on February 12th. The regularly scheduled gathering was supposed to deal with personnel matters, but instead, the focus turned to the staff's nascent union campaign, which had just gone public. Earlier that day, a Twitter handle claiming to represent Young Turks employees had announced on the social media platform their intention to form a union. In the staff meeting, the network's co-founder and influential host, Cenk Uygur, urged employees not to do so, arguing that a union does not belong at a small independent outlet like the Young Turks, according to 2 workers who were present. He said if there had been a union at the network, it would not have grown the way it has. Oh my God. Oh, that's delicious. That's some solid stuff. Just straight into my veins, man. Straight into the veins. I'm going to mainline this stuff.
I could not present that better than that.
Yeah, Ben is laughing that up too.
Well, after he and Cenk went around and Cenk screamed Google it at him 25 times.
Yeah, I actually didn't see the debate between them. And even though I said hard pass, I probably will go watch it. But,
It's
it
hilarious.
just shows,
It's worth it.
yeah, it shows the hypocrisy of it that, again, we had Bloomberg pay $500 million to declare in front of America that Bernie has 3 houses and millions of dollars. And it's like, the socialist order for thee and not for me. And these people always get exposed. Every time you have people who want to be in charge of socialist regimes, you have to question their motives, because it's like, I thought the whole socialist thing was that we're all equal, but you want to be in charge. What does that mean? Explain to me how you are entitled to be a millionaire, how you're entitled to have 3 homes, how you're entitled to have a business where your employees are not unionized. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So you don't even have to expose these people; they expose themselves. It's brilliant. I mean, you couldn't have paid for something like that. For God bless Cenk Uygur. How do you say his name? God bless him, because he did more to expose the fallacy of these programs than any number of conservatives could have ever done. He laid it all out there right there with that one line. It's like, oh, well, we couldn't have grown and become what we were if we had this system in place. Oh, but you want that for everybody else, do you? As
Yeah,
you've said
absolutely.
numerous times.
And they've been pushing it across the country, and they've been pushing the candidates out there. I mean, look at all the money they sank into AOC, and she's up there on the stage every day. Well, we are going to make a Green New Deal where everybody has a union job. She is trying to reach across to the Union Democrat side of this, but I mean, that's all that they yell, and all the people that they endorse yell, and now that it comes to them.
They're really reliant on the fact that nobody reads anything, because that Green New Deal that they actually put out was an astonishingly bad argument for them. It was like, if you had written something to make fun of what you thought the socialists or the socialist Democrats wanted, you couldn't have written that more comedically than what they actually wrote for the Green New Deal. Like, we're gonna demolish all the houses and rebuild them as plastic pods, and everybody's gonna eat bugs and whatever the fuck else it's gonna be.
Oh, I know. When I was still doing solo videos, I picked it apart line by line.
Oh, did you?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll have to go back and find that, because, yeah, I had a good time reading that myself and screaming at my computer screen. Like, how are you going to accomplish this? And God, if you ask them that question, that's like the linchpin in the whole argument is, how are you going to accomplish this? And they go, I don't know, billionaires? It's just like, it's like you might as well say rainbows or unicorns or something like that. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. What it means is that you have a system of gaining power, which is fundamentally based on the jealousy that other people feel about success. And that might not be a popular thing to say, but I think that a lot of the democratic socialist impetus comes from a fundamental feeling of jealousy and inability to accomplish things. Because, for example, there are now 118 million millionaires in this country. That number 30 years ago was nowhere near that. So you want to talk about like wealth disparity? We have a country that allows 118, or I'm sorry, I'm saying way more than actually is. Forgive me. Let me correct that. 18 million. That's still a lot though. 18 million people are millionaires. And you're talking about people who were not millionaires 30 years ago. So you have a country and a system that enables them to become millionaires. So, you know, to sell people on the idea that millionaires are their enemies, when you have a country with a culture of people that wants to become millionaires, it's a hard sell. You're not selling me with that. I would rather be a millionaire. I would rather have the opportunity to gain wealth and to become massively wealthy than I would for you to make everybody equally poor. You know, and absolutely, I believe in the charity of the human being, that we have it within us in our culture to want to take care of the poor and want to take care of the sick. So if you didn't have the government constantly robbing people of their taxes, I think a lot of those needs would be taken care of by people who know how to distribute their wealth better. Like, we know better than any central planner in Washington, D.C., how our wealth ought to be distributed. And I think we could do a much better job of charitably taking care of poor people, charitably taking care of sick people, widows and orphans. That comes from a proud Judeo-Christian culture that says that we should take care of the sick and we should take care of the indigent. Sorry, I'm getting off on a rant here. But we have a culture, the whole reason and I'm speaking to the leftists here, the whole reason that you believe that you should take care of poor people in the first place is because we have this Western culture that you revile so much. That culture is about the protection of women. It's about the protection of widows and orphans. We have those things in our culture already. So it's not as though if we didn't have the state to enforce this robbery on our wealth, that we wouldn't do those things. I think we would do those things, and we would do them better, because we could fund hospitals. We could fund charitable organizations that actually take care of people, instead of the government stealing that wealth and distributing it sort of amongst themselves. And then maybe the widows and orphans get some. That's bullshit. Everybody knows it's bullshit. Everybody knows that these government programs are bullshit. If you've ever been to a housing project, you know that this is bullshit. So, you know, taxation is theft. What else can I say?
Well, I want to go back to the union idea of this for a second here, now that the rant is over here, because
Sorry.
I mean, I just listened because I put up the bonus episode yesterday of myself on the R-rated conservative, and that was something that I was very adamant about. Well, we started talking about unions while I was on there, and I was very, very adamant about the idea that I don't mind people coming together, unionizing, trying to make a better life for themselves. I actually encourage that. But the structures that they have in place are Democrat. I mean, you look at the Green New Deal. That's all they want to do is create union jobs, because the unions are going to take the dues and they're going to kick a bunch of money back to the Democrat Party to try and keep them in power so they can try and enforce.
Yep. Absolutely.
Putting more people into the union.
Mm-hmm. You're dead on. You are dead on with that. It's not as though I oppose collective bargaining either. I don't.
No, I love collective bargaining.
Yeah, absolutely. But when it's voluntary. And, you know, my grandparents came from Detroit. They were Motor City people in the 60s. And so unions are something that my family holds in high esteem. But there's also the way that unions have been tied in with, you know, organized crime, the way that unions have been tied in with the government, which is almost kind of saying the same thing, but not. So, you know, it's not as though these organizations have maintained what we would think of as voluntary collective bargaining. They've become something else. They've become a political leverage unto themselves. And I definitely don't support that.
Well, and that's why the Young Turks have supported it so hard going on until it came onto their shores, because yes, that was going to go help put the party in power. That was going to help the Young Turks still get funded by Armenian people or whatever the hell it is over in the Middle East. But now it's come to their shore, and they've come to realize that not only are they helping the politicians when they're in the union, they actually are helping the employee on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Sank, is that how you say his name? Sank?
I just say water buffalo.
A terrifying yet accurate comparison. The idea of him trying to talk his own employees out of doing their own collective bargaining because it would not have allowed their network to grow to the size that it is, that sentence there alone shows the direct fallacy in all of this. If what he was proposing was such a good idea that he would be enthusiastic about it. He would say, yes, guys, let's do this. This is the way. And it proves that he is a hypocrite. And, that's not a nice thing that people like to hear about themselves, but I'm sorry, you're a hypocrite. You should have enthusiastically embraced this, especially since he himself is he's political. He's running, isn't he?
Yeah, he's running for Katie Hill's seat.
Yeah, so he's running. I mean, if anything, if you're trying to cultivate this persona of this political figure who's trying to change the system, which is definitely what his shtick is, then why wouldn't you enthusiastically take a photo with your unionizing employees and say, yeah, man, we unionized this bitch? But he didn't do that. He threw a fit and was like, no. Despite this massive amount of money that goes into the Young Turks, there's no way we can allow you guys to unionize and collectively bargain for the betterment of the employment structure here. So, yeah, all that does is shows me the hypocrisy of it. And if you hadn't already decided that Cenk Uygur was a absolute hypocrite, well, now you know. There's no way to deny it now. Like, if you go and you vote for that dude, like, oh, I have nothing left for you.
Well, you'll have something for Top Feet Coco here in a bit because he's running his mouth. I like Top Feet Coco. I never take anything he says that seriously, but it's still funny. Top Feet Coco comes in and says, well, let's start with the beginning here. Harvey McLeod says, just saying now, my husband says unions are the worst and mean the death of the hospitality business. And I know that's becoming a big thing on the West Coast where she is. Top Feet Coco says, I can't help but thinking that somewhere there's a kitchen missing a leader.
I cooked dinner for my husband before I did this. Thank you. I have my kitchen in order.
Spartan 0000 Subhuman, our newest mod over on the DLive channel, says taxation is extortion. Welcome on in, Spartan.
Yes, I agree.
Top says, even though she sounds like AOC just in tone and isn't the Jessica Green Google shows all whored out, she's based and red-pilled. But I can't help but feel for that poor empty kitchen.
Like I said, I made dinner. I still haven't done the dishes, though, so that might be a fair criticism, but I'm going to do them after.
Spartan says, Sink is what you call him, or Sunk. I still call him the water buffalo.
He's like the kitchen sink, everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah. Rotten kind of shares my point here. Unions were great when they were used to stop unsafe work practices. I don't agree with collective bargaining. Merit pay is just pay. Harvey McLeod says, yeah, employees don't like unions. And now they're going on to a discussion. So we're going to slip back into the Project Veritas news. I couldn't find, this has been pretty well scrubbed from YouTube at this point. I was trying to get the actual video out there because I usually can. I can get the Veritas releases. This is gone off YouTube.
The Washington Post published an article about it, and I thought that they had linked the video.
I wanted to get the video up on. I can't do it now because obviously it'll
fair enough.
It'll melt down my processor. But yeah,
I find it. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So according to the Washington Post, actually, David Wright has now been suspended at ABC for admitting the fact on a Project Veritas video that ABC has bias in the way that they report on President Trump. And he actually said that he thinks it's unfair that they report on Trump the way that they do, but it's all okay because it drives ratings. And he also came out and claimed to be an open and out socialist. Now, this has caused him to be suspended with pay. He is still employed by the ABC company, but he's not going to be a lead anchor anymore at this point. So what did you see on this one so far?
So I read the Washington Post article on it, obviously, as I said. And I think that it's almost a non-story to say that the corporate media has a bias against Trump, because it's like, how obvious can you be? Obviously, that's the case. But I agree with him. He's absolutely right that it's ratings driven. Ever since you began the 24-hour news cycle, you have a vested interest in keeping people constantly locked into your news cycle. And it's about driving ratings. It's not about journalism or the news or anything like that. And I agree with Michael Malice when he says that the corporate press is the enemy of the people, because they are given what they're going to report to you, and they stick to that script faithfully. And so much so, I mean, I think they believe it. 50% they believe it, and 50% they know they'll get fired if they don't. So there are probably some people who are real journalists still there who just know that if they step outside of the allowable boundaries, that they'll be fired. This guy, he's not being fired for his bias. He's being fired because he got caught. He got caught by Project Veritas. They exposed him, but it's not as though the things that he was saying are not known. It's not as though that's not already the popular opinion.
Right, but they still do try to feign objectivity in all of this.
They feign it, but it's like the old ladies who would pretend to faint because they were such delicate flowers. Like, we all know you aren't fainting. Like, come on. They know that they're biased. They know that we know that they're biased. Because look at the story that came out about Epstein, about not even the Epstein story itself, the story that came out about how the Epstein story was pushed down and how they had that story 3 years before it ever broke. And, you know, that girl, I can't remember her name now, but she was caught on a hot mic being like, I had this story. I can't believe they didn't let me report it. And the funny thing about her is she wasn't even pissed off that they didn't that the story didn't get out and that so many lives could have been saved in that 3 years. She was pissed off that she didn't get to be the one to break it, that she wasn't the one who got like the credit for it, even though that was her story. So like, I'm not trying to say that like I have all this sympathy for her character as a journalist or anything like that, because I don't. I think that she was mad about her lost opportunity, but it's not a secret. They know that we know that they're biased, but they just keep right on going anyway, because I don't know what it is. I think it's that maybe there are just enough people who still trust them that it keeps them running. Or it's that even though they know people don't trust them, they're still going to tune in. Like, we still go to their Twitter and we still comment. Even if the comment is, you're an effing liar, we still go and we still comment. And we still keep that cycle running. So, you know, maybe it's become that, you know, how like outrage is the currency on social media. Maybe that outrage is the currency of the corporate press now. And they know it doesn't matter whether they tell the truth or not. What matters is if they get attention. And so, you know, they'll do anything they need to for that. As long as they stay within the empire's allowed opinion, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with him getting fired off of this here. If I'd have been him and I would have actually believed what he was saying on Veritas, I would have quit. But I mean, of course, he's got that 7-figure salary that he's getting from Disney to do it.
Yeah, it's money. They say money is the devil, and that sounds like a cute little quip, but it's hard to walk away from 7 figures. I think that you could compromise a lot in your life if you were getting 7 figures in return.
I thought foosball was the devil.
Foosball. I've never been directly harmed by a foosball, so I don't want to talk
My
badly.
mama says that foosball is the devil.
Oh no. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. The old memory is failing me. Everything's the devil to that woman, though. Isn't that the case?
Yeah.
With that movie, everything was the devil. Yeah. She's hilarious. I love her.
What this does, though, it absolutely does lend credence to the idea that, I mean, what we are doing is the media at this point. I mean, the mainstreams are failing because everybody knows that they're doing what they were accused of doing by this. It's not a secret.
You have to be willfully ignorant. And that's to the point where I know this has come out. I know these stories have come out, but I'm going to ignore them. And those people exist. It's like the Matrix, where he was talking about people will fight to protect their version of reality. I think that is a metaphor for how people behave in the real world, that they will, even though there's all this contradictory information coming at them, they want to preserve their comfort. They want to preserve their echo chamber. And so they'll do whatever they have to do, including ignoring obvious bias, including ignoring, I don't know how many times ABC and CNN and all of these people can be busted for their outright lying. It's not even just biased stories. They're caught lying all the time directly to the people, and people still watch them. But not as many as used to. Their numbers are slipping, and more people are watching, podcasts and alternative media, and that's a good thing. It gives me a lot of hope.
Well, and that goes back to something that you said when we were talking about 2020 as well. I mean, for how, oh no, it was before that, it was when you were telling us about yourself. How long did we have before, or way back when all of the media, everything that you knew about the world came from four sources?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't as though you got one news program at the end of the night. They had like an hour, 30 minutes to tell you everything you needed to know about the world. So it's just a small amount of information that's approved by the right sources to come to you. And now they have a 24-hour news cycle with commercials. And this can be pointed out by the debate that we just watched with the Democrats, where they the host said, "Okay, we're ready to end the debate now. Goodbye, everybody." And the girl said, "Oh, no, no, no. We have one more commercial break." Well, it's not as though there was any more debate left after that. They ended the debate after the commercial break, but they had sold that commercial time. So they needed to keep everybody there. And her saying, "Oh, the debate's over, you can turn it off now," that doesn't allow them to get however many $1,000 was paid for these commercials to be on.
Oh, I think that's million with an M at that point.
Million, sure, yeah. I mean, this has got to be like Super Bowl, almost Super Bowl level watching going on with these things, because it's not even just Democrats that watch it. It's people like you and I who want fodder for our podcasts that watch this stuff. So, the incentives are all wrong. There's no incentive to give us information. There's no incentive to give us the news. There's incentive to give us just enough emotionally biased stories to get us pissed off, to get us riled up, to keep us glued to their channel. And if they can, they're experts at doing that. I mean, I recall the Charlottesville, the riots in Charlottesville. The way that was executed by CNN to keep their watchers absolutely glued into their television sets for 12 hours straight in absolute terror that Nazism and white supremacy was taking over America. And they executed that perfectly. And right in the middle of that 12-hour-long horror fest that I was privy to because I was a liberal at the time, there were like 15 commercials for different drugs and different products and all the different things that they wanted to sell to us. So, that's the incentive. The incentive is to keep you locked in, and they don't have to tell you the truth for that. They can lie to you to your face and the next day come out and say, "Oh, we got a little bit of this information wrong," or whatever. Or they don't even do that. They don't even retract their bullshit. They just say it. And they know that people don't read into things, so they get away with it. And our only hope is that people get lied to enough that they become mistrustful. And you should be mistrustful. You should mistrust the corporate press. It is your enemy. It is in bed with all the worst parts of the state who are there to inform control the way that you think about the world. And it is reinforced by all of the people around you who watch those same programs. So if you say something like, "I don't think this makes sense," oh, what are you questioning the intelligence agencies? What are you questioning the corporate press? ABC has been around for many, many years. Are you questioning them? Yes, I am questioning them. They're full of shit. Sorry.
Well, I think we're going to go check in with the live chat here one more time.
Right on.
I do have to ask you because I know we're at the 2-hour mark and that's what you promised me here. But do you want to hit this last topic or do you want to skip it?
Yeah, I'm good. We can keep going. I'm having a good time.
All right, let's see. Let's make sure nobody's killing each other in the live chat here. They're talking about minimum wage law here. Taxation is theft and so is forced pay, says Ron. Let's see. Also, he says, "I am 100% against government determining pay. The government is populated with people who can't run a business and they decide the pay. No."
Yeah.
Harvey McLeod says, "I don't think a McDonald's burger flipper needs to be paid the same as an EMT, and minimum wage raises would make it so."
Actually, a lot of EMTs are paid at the same rate or less. My brother-in-law was an EMT, and those people are paid at abysmal rates. It's awful. Yeah. But I don't think that a person who flips burgers is necessarily creating the same value in our society as someone who is an EMT. And if there weren't minimum wage laws, those things through the market would find a better balance than they have now. But unfortunately, we have someone who, and let's be real, I mean, who hasn't had their fast food order screwed up? These are a lot of people who are teenagers and people who aren't invested in this as a career for the rest of their lives, and nor should they be. You know, and also let's talk about the fact that it drives impoverished people out of the workforce. I mean, let's talk about the fact that, you know, when you create minimum wage laws, the employment rate for young Black men bottoms out. And that's not something that I think should be passed up when we're talking about minimum wage laws, that it does actually affect people. If you are allowed to hire people for the wage that you're willing to pay them, it opens up the market to people who otherwise might not get jobs. If I have to pay an employee $15 an hour, I need an employee that's worth $15 an hour. And I'm not making a statement about personal worth or worth as a human being, but I'm saying that people, like, for example, people have learning disabilities. There used to be a job market for them where they could do when I worked in restaurants, I worked in the restaurant industry for like 10 years. And we had busboys and those kind of positions who were filled by people who had learning difficulties. And when these minimum wage laws started becoming passed in cities like Atlanta tends to be very blue as opposed to like a lot of the red area around it. So there are, you know, increasing minimum wage rates in Atlanta as opposed to the surrounding areas. So people who could no longer be employed at those rates just didn't have jobs anymore. And the sense of fulfillment that people who, you know, might not necessarily be a $15 an hour employee, but maybe you would hire them at $5 or $10 an hour, you're giving people who ordinarily wouldn't have access to the work market access to that. And so I think that it's a hell of a thing to say that these people shouldn't have jobs. And I'm not talking about they should be paid less because they're less worthy human beings. That's not what's being said here. That's the way that gets twisted, but that's not what I'm saying.
And that's what I'm to take what you're, as somebody who's worked in the restaurant industry before, the busboy is not making you money.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the sense of keeping the flow of the restaurant going, but I can bus my own tables. It's really more of a luxury. But if it's like this person ordinarily wouldn't be in the workforce at $15 an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would be in the workforce at $7.50. I would so much rather that person have a job than not. And saying, well, you should both employ this person who can't give you $15 worth of productivity at $15 an hour. You're stifling the ability of business to grow. And business to grow, the ability of business to grow has a hell of a lot to do with our standard of living and rising the standard of living, especially for people in the lower income sector, especially for people who don't have specialized skills. You need to have lower income positions for people. And with an increasingly technological world, a lot of these people are being left behind. They're being left behind in the job market. So it's important that they have places where, you know, these people are able to have work fulfills you. When you work, you have something that you're doing that's contributing to humanity. And especially, I think that people who are not able to have jobs, it leaves them with a sense of listlessness. And that listlessness can turn into crime. It can turn into a bunch of other negative effects that affect the rest of the community. So I don't think that minimum wage laws are necessarily a good thing. I think that they actually do a lot more damage to our society than, you know, they pretend to be raising the standard of living, but they're not. They're leaving low income, low skilled people out of the workforce.
And that's where we're going to leave that for right now here. We'll let these two go back and forth with each other for a little while we go back and forth on a completely different topic here. So, on the 26th, the Justice Department announced that there's going to be a task force to denaturalize certain citizens who have been accused and convicted of certain levels of crime. Now, I didn't realize that this was actually a law previously when I started looking into this, so I actually researched this and found out that this is actually something that's been done before. Now, I don't think that we should be allowed to do this. Once you're a citizen, you should be protected. And this is going with people that are saying that Ilhan Omar needs to be deported, even though she is a citizen at this point here. But
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I know a lot of people wish we could deport her, but it's a lot like adopting a child, isn't it? Like, once you adopt that kid, it's yours. It's the same as though it came out of your body.
yeah,
You can't just like, oh, well, it's crappy, we give it back now. Like, that's not how that works. You know, once you're a naturalized citizen, and that brings me to something that Britt said on your last episode, actually, about like, where does it stop? If they can denaturalize people who are citizens who come from other places, can they denaturalize me? Maybe I don't have the right opinions, you know, maybe I commit some crimes and then they can deport you to somewhere else. You know, where does it stop, really? If you're a citizen, you have the same rights and privileges that I do as a person who was born here. I don't think we can give you back after that. It seems like a permanent purchase.
yeah,
to me.
absolutely. And that's, I mean, these are legal people too who have taken the time to go through the process that the people that are on Trump's side are telling the illegal people to go through the process of. So now that they've gone through the process, now they want to say that they want to take away that protection that they're trying to convince these people to go through the process for. And I think a lot of the people that are on the Trump side don't want the illegal people to go through the process either, but that's another story for another show.
And we have enough trouble in this country where illegal people who commit crimes are not even being deported. And I think that's something that would be a much greater focus of energy, is when people who are illegal, who commit serious crimes, we're talking about like armed robbery, rape, child molestation, a lot of the policies of some of these sanctuary cities is that, you know, they're released. They're caught and released. They don't turn them into the INS. These are people who are heinous criminals. And I know Trump got into a lot of trouble for saying they're not sending our best here, they're sending criminals, so on and so forth. But the context of that comment, which of course the corporate press does not take into account, is he wasn't saying that every person who comes here, by virtue of having crossed a borderline, is a bad person. Yes, they committed a crime by doing that, but they're not, that if they come here, their only crime is that they've crossed the border, and that's it. They've otherwise been a productive type of person. I have no problem with that type of individual. But if you come here illegally and then you've committed crimes, you've harmed citizens, you know, we should be invested in the protection of our own citizens before we are invested in the protection of illegal aliens. And that's not what's happening. I read a case on Twitter today that absolutely broke my heart, about a girl who had been sexually assaulted by somebody who happened to be illegal. And the optics of arresting him at church were too much for the INS, or I guess they're called ICE now, to proceed with. And so the statute of limitations on her case ran out. And so that person was never, you know, given any justice for the fact that she was assaulted by this person. He was basically allowed to continue to roam free in our country. So, you know, it's not even like, you're talking about people who are completely naturalized, who have gone through the process, gone through all these legal processes. They're a citizen. We have shitty citizens who were born here. You know, we deal with them the same way. We need to focus on people who didn't come through that path, who didn't come here legally. And we can't even deport people who are illegal who commit crimes. So this seems like, who are you? You know, yeah, you're maybe like appealing to your base, I guess, by trying to enact an act like this. But you can't even get the illegal people who commit crimes out of here. What are you going to do with naturalization?
Well, I know where this started as well when it first was talked about in 1906. Was a lot of this was going along with the Red Scare, especially after I guess pre-1906, because, or where are we going? 1919 and prior, that would just be people who came from another country who were generally being assholes, who were raping, who were stealing. And I believe this precedes the 16th Amendment, too.
Yeah, I think the 16th came about in the 19 teens. So 1906 would definitely precede that.
So, yeah, you're dealing with a process that doesn't apply to people, but yeah, you're also sending out some of the worst people who slipped through the system, took advantage of the system, and now they're roaming free and causing problems in the country. Now, a lot of this continued on up through the 60s with the Red Scare, of course, wanting to send people out of the country who had somehow become naturalized and were spies for another country. And that's under the Cold War that we were in. I don't necessarily agree with it still, but it's completely understandable for a Cold War era.
There's always been a group of people that have been the target of fear on behalf of the government. Early on in our history, it was the French. There was like a Francophobia, and we had actual laws against French people coming in and being naturalized and things. And, you go on through history, it's like the French or it's the Mexicans or it's the Japanese. And, we've come full circle now to people who come from Southern American countries. There's always somebody that we're pointing at to say all of the troubles that you might be experiencing are because of this group of people. So I think there is some of that sentiment that comes from our state, because it's a lot easier for the state to point the finger, not necessarily point the finger, but allow the cultural perception that this group of people is the cause of the ills. That does benefit them. But at the same time, I think that creating a thing like this is meant more for optics than it is for practical solutions, because they can't, like I said, they can't even get the illegal people out.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that Trump is trying to court those asshole Coulterites again.
Yeah, Coulterite. Yeah. I bet she would enjoy the thought of that, to be honest. But
well, they all turned on him.
Oh, did they?
Because he didn't wind up being the racist that they were selling him as.
Oh, sorry, guys. Yeah, that doesn't get enough. That we don't talk about that enough, is how there is an actual alt-right. Like, so many of us get accused of being kind of like alt-rightish people, that you forget that there is this alt-right, and they are, the way that they are. And Trump has again and again proven not to be like that. And so many of the people they accuse of being that way aren't like that. And they hate him. It's funny. Like, we brought up Ben Shapiro earlier. Ben Shapiro gets accused of being alt-right. He's a Jewish man. The alt-right does not tend to like the Jews. So it's really funny, because it kind of like exposes that whole narrative for the absolute falseness that it is. Not that anybody who uses that narrative will allow themselves to understand that their narratives are exposed, but it is nonetheless exposed to everybody else. And, a person like myself, I was deep in that narrative, and it became so fallacious that I walked away from it. And it doesn't mean that, I walked away from the liberals and there was like I said, there's a Republican waiting with a net to catch me as I walked out of that. I turned in my liberal card and he caught me with the net, and now I'm a Trump supporter. Absolutely not. I'm not going to go vote for Trump. I'm not going to go vote for anybody else. I don't necessarily believe in voting anymore. But what did happen is that a person who was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, a radical leftist SJW type of person, was like, wow, this is messed up, and walked away from it. And if that happened to me, I'm not a particularly smart person. So if that happened with me, that's happening with other people. That has to be happening with other people. I can't believe that it's happening to me alone. I was not the only person who realized these things. And, that's going to work in Trump's favor, because I think there are enough people who are pissed off at the Democrats to go pull that lever for Trump. But that doesn't necessarily make them right-wingers. It doesn't make them Republicans. It doesn't make them anything but what they are, is people who don't want to go down this radical progressive road, who don't want to celebrate political violence, who don't want to hold up pictures of guillotines and laugh about how freaking funny a guillotine is. Like, do people not realize that everybody who rolled out a guillotine eventually ended up beneath that guillotine? Like, that was the fate of the people. That trips me out that they love this image of this guillotine, and they love thinking about the French revolutionaries as people that they want to be like. It's like, no, they got murdered by the mob too. And the mob that you're creating has a bloodlust that will eventually take you too. And, you know, if you want to believe it wouldn't happen to you too, that's fine. But that malevolence you feel toward people who don't think like you can be turned on you instantaneously. So if you're a member of the leftist cult, I urge you to open your mind to listening to people who have ideas outside of your own.
Well, and I know you were in it too. I mean, I was to a different sort of extent, but I mean, you were into the deep end of that too. Like, I look at Bernie Sanders' policies, and we're going right back up to 2020 at this point. I look at Bernie Sanders' policies, and I think if he grew a little mustache and replaced billionaires with a certain ethnic class, that if I say it out loud, they're going to shut my YouTube channel down. You're getting a lot of the same things, and he's one step away from putting them on boxcars and sending them to a certain type of camp where they learn how to concentrate.
There is a deep lack of historical context. Especially, like, you know, I'm 36, which doesn't exactly make me a young person anymore. And among my age group of people, knowledge of modern history or recent history, I mean, history with just in the last 100 years or so, is sorely lacking. I mean, most people can tell you a little bit about the Romans, a little bit about the Greeks, a little bit about the medieval times, but basically anything in the last 100 years is a big, giant blank slate, last 200 years even. And that leaves people in a very vulnerable and dangerous position for all of the things that occurred over the last 200 years to occur again. And there was a lot of death and a lot of chaos, and especially when we have people who are actually advocating socialist and communist regimes. Socialist and communist regimes are responsible for the death of 40 million individual human beings. And you tell that to people, and you know, Project Veritas, again, came out with that video of that Bernie Sanders campaign manager who was like, well, you know, the gulags weren't that bad. And the kulaks, you know, they didn't get it that bad. You know, they kind of deserved it. It was like, these people were murdered. They were shot in front of ditches. It was Jordan Peterson recommends a book called The Gulag Archipelago. And that is a hard book to read, not in terms of the way that it's written. It's actually very easy to read, but in terms of what truly happened during the Soviet Union and the starvation of the Ukrainian people and the murder of the kulaks, the Maoist regime and their murder of the landlords. These are not, it's not just a political disagreement here. We have proof positive of the way that these regimes take their power and use it. And anybody who thinks that we can just sort of lay back and lazily allow this sort of communist rhetoric to take over the minds of people is, you know, they're the first ones going to be lined up for the boxcar, unfortunately. You know, we have to, that's why I'm sorry to get off on a rant here, but that's why the Second Amendment is so important. If you don't have a means of protecting yourself, what's to stop them from coming to get you when you don't agree with what they say? And yeah, sure, you agree right now. You agree with the perfectly reasonable things that they want you to think. But inch by inch, they move it further and further until you find yourself having to agree with absolutely unreasonable ideas, or find yourself in that group of people that, well, they didn't get it so bad, meaning they ended up in a ditch, they ended up loaded into a boxcar. So, you know, take that at your own peril. Learn history. Know the history of these regimes, the history of the way that communism has actually played out when these countries have tried to enact it. Because it's not cute. It's not a game. It's literally the starvation of everybody you have ever met. Sorry. Continue.
I think that's where we're going to call it, to be completely honest. We're way off topic at this point here.
I didn't mean to take it to such a dark place. I am a positive person. I don't like to leave things on negative notes, but that's just the nature of the beast when you're talking about politics, I guess.
Well, we'll check in with the live chat for the last time here, so get your last minute comments in on this. Uh, Harvey and Ron were talking about government regulating money and it being thanks to the gold standard, which is a really, really good thing to do. I'm going to read the chat here, and while you're telling us about your hobby after I'm done here, I'll pop the chest for everybody who's over on D Live. So we'll get that reloaded up and ready to go. Ron Helton says 3 worst presidents ever: Lincoln, Wilson, and FDR. All three of them ignored and exceeded the limits of their office.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Wilson being the worst of them. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Passing blanket laws to deprive people of their property and businesses without an appearance in a court of law is gross abuse of Bill of Rights. Oh, something rang.
Oh, I think my alarm system, the hub is in here, and I think my husband went out the back door. Sorry.
Huh. My alarm clock went off on a live stream too this morning, so it happens.
Oh, yeah.
Using the exclusive national security, economic security, or any other security is not acceptable. Government is out of control. Harvey McLeod says the French revolutionaries also just swapped their monarchy for a worse tyrannical government.
True. Very true.
Ron Helton says the current configuration of this country is not far removed from that of Great Britain. They fought for liberty and are now moving back to the nanny state. If we had a truly free market system in this country without government interference, everyone would have jobs that they needed to survive.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Harvey's got last word for the night from the live chat here. I'll go back and read everybody else's live chat afterwards, but this will be the last word for the live chat. Says last comment. I like the part in Fresh Prince meets Donald Trump, and he goes, "It's the Donald. Oh my God." That's going to be the last word for the live chat. Thanks everybody for coming in, hanging out, keeping us honest, and keeping us moving down some avenues we didn't think we were going to go down.
That's what you get with me. I go down some avenues.
Well, we're going to let you talk about yourself for a bit while I set up the D-Live chest here. So we end things on such a dark note so many times in politics. It's such a dark thing, as you say. So we always try to end the show on a positive note here. So tell the audience and myself about a hobby that you have that has nothing to do with work or politics. I mean, album that you picked up, video game you've been playing, just something that helps you unwind at the end of the day. And meanwhile, I'm going to go pop the D-Live chest. So everybody get in your D-Live and get ready for that. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. So I really like to be outdoors. So anything that can take me outdoors is generally something I consider worth doing. I like to go kayaking and hiking. Georgia has very mild winters, so I'm fortunate in that department because we can go outside pretty much any time. And then I'm also an avid gardener, so I like to grow as much of my own food as possible. And, you know, this year we're trying the Back to Eden method, which is something you guys can learn about on YouTube if you are interested in it. But it's a permaculture no-till based gardening, which is something very different than I've done in the past. So I'm sure it will be disastrous, but I really like, this is hard to say and be understood, but I like failing because I learn a lot from it. So every time I do something wrong in my garden, I'm able to do it better next year and get better returns for it. So I encourage everybody to have some experience with growing your own food. Even if you live in an apartment, if you have a balcony, you can grow a pepper plant out there. Just experiencing the fact that all of nature is connected and that the sun, the earth, the air, the soil, all of it comes together to create food for you is something that we're separated from because we go to grocery stores now. And connection to our food is extremely important. So that's something that I spend a lot of time investing in, is my personal connection to my food.
And I understand gardening too. I've not tried my own food yet. I'm actually going to be trying that for the first time this year. But for I think it's been 4 years now, I've been raising carnivorous plants.
Excellent. Yeah. And plants are so challenging. And, you know, you have to be patient, which is not something that our current society of instant gratification is. It's not something that's engendered. Mm-hmm. So the patience and the willingness to fail that comes with gardening is such an important skill that, much to our detriment, we have pulled ourselves away from our connection to, and I know I sound like a hippie when I'm saying this, but we are connected to the earth. We are a piece of the earth. And we should not forget that everything that sustains us comes from it. And we should respect it and be good stewards of it.
Well, that's what I got here. I want to thank everybody who came out and checked us out live over on D Live, YouTube, Twitch, Periscope for Twitter, and Facebook. Oddly enough, decided to work tonight. So thanks everybody who swung by while they were doing their mindless scrolling before bed and checked us out. If you didn't catch the entire video live, you're just catching up now. You can find us on demand on YouTube as soon as it processes, or over on BitChute.com, or we are on the audio platforms as well, rather. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. And if you have another podcatcher that you want me to add it to, just let me know and I'll add it to that podcatcher. You can catch us on the go. And remember, if you're on YouTube, BitChute, leave the thumbs up and subscribe if you're not there already. Or if you are on any of the audio platforms, or iTunes especially, leave us that 5-star rating and a good review. That helps us move up the charts over there. Lastly, Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Come over, check us out, check over the generational gap, the R-rated conservative, roundtable decision, Stephen Ignoramus. Check out all of us over there. Look for people who are looking to write too, because we're always looking for people to come and write for us as well. We've got some big changes coming up to our site, so watch the site for details and keep up with us as we go. As we always say on this show, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Jessica, why don't you give us a last word?
I guess my last word would be to keep an open mind and know that people who disagree with you are just human beings, and try to do your best to understand them, even when you're angry.
Thank you for that, and take care, everyone.